I'm just standing here waiting for things to come to life. At this point, I'm going to say hello, everyone, even though every one of you hasn't arrived yet. And it's time for another live stream. I believe this is our 114th live stream that we've had since we started doing live streams on this channel. So we have a lot going on. Several of you have immediately said first. So not all of you are first. For some reason, this is kind of different. Oh, look at that. I don't know why, but my chat box, the words are huge where I can read it really easily. And it's just because I changed the format of the shape of the window. So, guys, I hope that everything sounds okay and that you are ready to go. Okay, Tim just let me know that. I'm happy about that. And listen, I wanted to, first of all, I need to apologize. I didn't get the Clarity video out this week like I'd hoped. I've had a lot going on this week. I've got a lot of work done. I've been exercising to make my neck hurt less. So there's been a lot going on. And, you know, there's only so many hours on the day. And last night, I even wanted to be productive and ended up passing out. So that is just kind of how things end up. But quickly off the top of my head, I just want to let you know that the Clarity video will be the next one out. I'd like to do a quick video about using LiveRock Enhance. And I would like to also do one on F-Aptasia because that has been a very popular product. And I feel like, I'm sorry guys, something's in my throat. I just feel like that would be a really good one to showcase. It'll be one of those quick and dirty videos, thank goodness, so I can just get that done. The biggest news coming up is going to be Monday, is the day that's scheduled for Spock's vet visit. So I'm excited to see how that goes. I've got an old fish trap. I was hoping to build a new one by now. I don't know if it'll happen in time. So, dang it. I should take a cough drop to this presentation. I'm hoping to, I wanted to make a new fish trap, but I might use my old one just because I need a way to get Spock out of the tank for the vet. And she's going to inspect her and see if her eye can be mended or if it's something we just should leave alone. But, that's that. To my right, which I guess is for you as your left, is a whole bunch of Choral magazines. And these were sent to me by Choral Magazine to give to you guys during the live stream. So what I was thinking about doing, since I can't do everything myself, we've got a couple moderators watching the chat. I'm going to let them pick who's worthy. And maybe it'd be based on the question you ask or the kindness you show others. I don't know. I need some help with this one. But I do want to say that because I'm paying for the shipping on each one of these, I'm going to stick to the US only this week. So let's just, so we can put some numbers on it. Let's plan on giving away 5 issues during this show today. So maybe like, I don't know, starting in 10 minutes. And if Andrea's here, I'm not sure who's in here right now, moderator-wise. Let me hop on my chat really quick. Give me 1 second. I already see people, I want the magazine. You will get dealer's choice. You won't get to pick which one it is. Okay, Andrea's here. Great. Thank you, Andrea. You're in charge of choosing who deserves to have a magazine. And there's a lot of topics, and I'm just going to be grabbing them off of here, and they will be going into the mail to you this week. Also, some of you a while back signed up to get stickers, and that hasn't happened yet. I'm still waiting for a bunch of envelopes to show up that are pre-addressed, so I don't have to spend the time filling out all these envelopes myself. So that's also on the hit list of things to do. There's so many things to do. And every week, it just seems like I'm making some forward momentum, but then I come up with more ideas, which makes my life more complicated and slows things down again. So this top issue by Choral Magazine is about Tangs. And look, I know it looks like Spock. It's not her. Wouldn't that be cool, though? Hey, Matt Peterson, where's my fish? Now, so this issue here is Volume 10, Number 4. And it's dated July, August of 2013. So this is a back issue that may or may not be available if you're trying to actually get it to add to your collection. So that'd be kind of a cool one. In the future, I don't know, we'll figure out something about using or shipping to more than the US, okay? It's just, one time I gave away a book on this channel, thought, oh, cool. And then shipping was something like, I think it was something like $28 to ship a book. because it went international, and I had no idea. You know, I figured it'd be $5, $6, $8 to mail, and they're like, no, it's international, it costs a lot more, and it's very heavy. I'm like, it's book rate. They said book rate only works for in the U.S., which is where you get your discount. So I felt a little bit like I took a hit on that one, so I'm trying to keep it reasonable. So, okay. Someone just asked the question about if I had used, matter of fact, I would need to see what happens when I paste this onto the one. Let me try something really quick here. Yes, it worked. All right, so it's a little bit big. We'll shrink that down just a tad. And, and I froze my computer. Let me do this for a second. All right, unfroze the computer. Gee, scary. Yeah, we'll put that right there. So I'm going to try this one more time, probably freeze the computer one more time. And I wanted to show you. Oh, that's what it was. It was trying to load iTunes, of course. So what we've got here is the Versa, and it is installed. Oh, I'm sorry, let me do this so you can see it a little bit better. It actually is installed as of last night. And I put this on to continuously feed my calcium reactor to replace the Comor. Okay, so we'll come back to here. And what is going on? And I lost another window. Sorry, guys. Comments. There we are. All right, so the Versa came out. It was showcased last September in at MACNA. I even hauled it with me to Dubai to show the guys over there so they could see it in person, because there was, I think, an Ecotech rep there, and he was talking about their products, and he says, bring your Versa, so I did. And so it's been sitting here kind of unused. I was trying to beta test it initially, and I just never had the time, to be completely honest. And I feel a little bit badly because, well, I don't know about beta test. They were saying, here, use it. It wasn't a beta test. And I was having problems with the hidden app that didn't exist yet. And so finally the app is now out and everyone's using it, and there's a lot of people with the Versa pumps, and I thought to myself, I need to hook it up. And so what I wanted to talk about was this, and this is going to be a little bit negative. So this is my Comor pump that I've been using for the last year and a half, I guess. That sounds about right. And last weekend we did a whole live stream about calcium reactors, and I talked about this pump and how it pushes water into the calcium reactor, and how I made it quieter, and I was really happy about that. And I used a certain type of solvent, or not solvent, a certain type of lubricant that's designed for Minion. And I wasn't sure if spraying that on these little white rollers would affect the tubing and possibly degrade it and cause it to break down, to crack, to leak. So I contacted a few of my friends and said, here's what I used. What do you think? And, you know, basically they were like, you shouldn't have used that. But it was dead silent. It wasn't making the sound I was hearing was kind of like a clickety, 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 which was the sound of the little white rollers turning, which initially when you start it, they're not very loud, but then over time, as it gets used, it starts to get a little bit louder, and so you're supposed to lubricate it. They include a little tiny sachet of a lubricant you can put in there, but it's really hard to get it actually into these little rollers right in there. This part is not serviceable. You can't actually like take it apart, clean the rollers with like a Q-tip, put in fresh grease and reassemble, which would be perfect. Instead, it's like a one-piece thing that you could remove the wheel with the Allen wrench, but you can't get into it and actually hit it with this silicone grease and get it in, which is, you know, it's like packing bearings. It's really hard to do. So I solved it with the spray lubricant, and I was very judicious with it. I didn't just like spray it like spray paint. I actually did a little tiny shot into each little roller, all 5, and then I flipped it over and did the other side of all 5, and lo and behold, it was nice and quiet. However, now that it was quiet and my whole reef is quiet, I was hearing this weird humming sound that kind of reminded me of a pool pump. And I know it's not a great comparison, but that's just what it kind of reminded me of. And I thought, I wonder what pump is making that sound. That doesn't make any sense. So I was thinking maybe it was the Vectra, and I put my hand on it and it was dead silent like always. I thought, that's weird, and I was thinking the Abyss is underwater, it can't be that. So I turned off the Comor and the sound went away. I was like, really? So basically there is like a resonating sound coming out of the Comor itself, and once I eliminated the clicking, I could now hear the humming. And I mean, when you've got the TV on or you're playing music or something, you don't hear it. But when you're just in the house, I could hear the humming. And my aquarium is open. You guys know that. There's no woodwork. There's nothing to like muffle the sound and hide it in a room or close cabinet doors. The sound just comes through into the rest of the house. And I can be in my bedroom and I could hear the pool pump. And I know that sounds terrible. It's not that bad, but I could hear it, and I was preferring to not hear it because I don't hear the tank, so why should I hear it just was like annoying. So I thought, well, I have a brand new Versa. I should hook that up and see if it gets rid of that sound, which of course it did because it's a totally different device. However, the Versa is not dead silent either, at least thus far. It seems to have a slight clicking sound to it. It could be that I have one of the early models and the later ones are even better. So I'm planning to get another one so I can actually double check. And Devin from Reef Dudes did a really nice video about the Versa and how to set it up easily. And he did a whole unboxing video because he's great about that. So feel free to check out his video where he talks about all things Versa. And he shows you the app and how to use the app. It's super helpful. I mean, guy, he's so good at that. I wish I could do that kind of stuff. He does it so well. So I actually watched his video really quick last night, and I said, all right, let me hook up my Versa, and got it in action within a matter of minutes, and the calcium reactor's been running with it all night long ever since. So that was pretty cool. And I did get rid of this pool pump sound that was bothering me. I got to tell you, it's kind of a vicious cycle because the more quiet I make my tank, the more little things I start to hear now. And it used to be, oh, my protein skimmer is too loud, and I solved that. And then it was like my external pumps are too loud, and I solved that. And I don't even know what else, but it's just been one thing after another has been replaced over the last 18 months or so. Oh, and all the drains were changed out to the quieter dual Herbie system that I run, and that's made everything a lot quieter. So now, basically you could hear a pin drop in here, it seems like, and I'm trying to avoid dropping pins. So it's kind of like I said, it's kind of vicious because now I'm being way too OCD about it, I guess is the best description. And I need to either tolerate it or I need to tell myself, well, your tank's been running for 6 years. I guess it's time to put up some woodwork. Maybe I should do that. And so I can kind of cocoon the sound in the fish room a little bit and out of my living area and my sleeping area. So that catches you up on that. So yes, the Versa so far has been running for, I don't know, let's call it 14 hours. And hopefully it'll do really well for a long time. Oh, the difference in price between the Kimor and now, okay, let me, again, I'm not trying to throw the Kimor under the bus because I used it for a year and a half and I was very happy with it. And it replaced something that was like this big to something that's, this little tiny guy instead of something about this long and about this wide and about this tall. I mean, it was a huge shoebox, and now I got this little guy. And I was running it at 70 ml per minute, which is about half of what it is rated. I think it's rated up to 120. There's some people running it at like 20, so it's going very slowly. Obviously, the slower the motor, the quieter it is, but it just seems like there's some kind of a sound. I almost wish there was sound dampening material like glued inside the metal to kind of like, I don't know, trap the sound. But most people probably won't even care. They probably won't even notice it. I think what they would notice was the clicking sound that happens when it gets time to lubricate. And that is it's kind of like a sewing machine noise, I guess. And getting rid of that was great, but then I could hear this humming noise and I couldn't tolerate that. I know I sound obsessively picky at this point, and I don't want to be that way. I'm just sharing my feelings. And, if you're looking for a steady, solid pump, the Kimor definitely is going to do the job. And if you have a fish room or if you have closed doors in your cabinet, probably you'll be ecstatically happy with it. I like that as a very small footprint that it can fit pretty much anywhere. And yeah, I mean, it's easy to calibrate, it's easy to adjust. And the newest one that just got dropped, in other words, is available now. I saw Premium Aquatics is selling it. They have a new Wi-Fi version, and it allows you to control it with your phone. And then the screen on the front has a screensaver now, so that way, I guess it won't burn out. And I never had that problem. But anyway, the new Versa has been out for a few months, so we're going to have to see, how that holds up long term. But Ecotech always stands behind their gear. There were some people complaining about leaks. Mine didn't leak. And I've heard that whoever did get the leaks, the Ecotech just sent you out like new somethings and just solved it. So I mean, even if you've heard, because that's okay, so that, can I rant for a second? one of the things I don't like is when somebody says, hey, are you going to get the Versa? And then the instant response is, oh, I've heard they're leaking. And so it makes it sound so ominous, rather than saying, I've heard they're leaking, but they're solving the problem, and if you contact Ecotech, if you happen to have one of those pumps, they will take care of you. That would be a great answer, instead of, oh, I heard they're leaking, because it basically implies don't get it. And that shouldn't be how it is, because sometimes when things go into production, certain bits of material maybe are not installed properly, are not lubricated properly, or maybe they weren't the same quality as the first ones used. You know, like the next batch came in and there was a defective O-ring or something like that. So whatever the problem was, Ecotech's on it and they've taken care of it. I think they said it was a very small amount of people that actually were encountering the problem, but it just kind of blows up on social media to where everyone's like, oh, where I don't think Devin is worried about his Versa. And, you know, we've got others that are using them. They're very happy. And those that got theirs corrected also were very happy too. So I wouldn't just throw it under the bus, you know, which is kind of what I feel like sometimes. That's how I read the post. Maybe I'm putting too much emotion behind the words I'm reading on the screen, but I'm always trying to understand the person typing where they're coming from. So, yeah, I have high hopes for the Versa, and we'll see how it goes for me, how it works out. But I have a good feeling about it. Like, I have all the Ecotech gear that I use, and I have Radions, Vectra pumps, Vortec pumps in all my tanks, and plus the Nero 5. So, you know, there you go. All right, talked about MyFishVet, talked about Choral Magazine, talked about the Versa. I mentioned the 3 videos I've got in the works. The next project for this week between customer service is going to be getting the water change station done. I've mentioned it for months, and every week goes by. And I think mostly what it is I'm sure that when I start to cut PVC pipe, I'm going to discover I'm missing one thing, and I really want to make sure I have all the inventory on hand, ready to go. Fresh cans of glue. I always have to start with fresh cans of glue because used stuff never works. And that way I can go ahead and glue that plumbing together, be done, and start making some salt water, because I have been neglecting that for much, much, much too long, and I don't have a stash available in case there's an emergency, which is terrible because we want to be prepared. And while I know I could call Frank's Tanks down the street and say I need water at 3 in the morning, he would race up here and give me water. I'd much rather just grab it from the container behind my tank and not tell Frank, I'm so sorry I made you do this. I could have done this myself if I just fixed the plumbing. So I'm redoing the plumbing on that tank. I'm going to install a Vectra L2, M2 on there for circulation. I'm going to use some garden hose that is designed for drinking water. So normally when you see that, it's white colored. If there's any kind of metal fittings, I'm cutting those off. And I'm going to have a little spool on the wall to hang it on, and that way when I have to do a water change on either the frag system, which desperately needs one, or on the main reef, I can just take the hose off the spool and point it into the appropriate sump, pump in water, and then spool it back up on the wall and it's out of the way. So that has been one of these things I've been thinking about for a long time, and I just have to make the time to do it, and I'm going to make the time this next week. So that is coming up. And then yesterday I did a thing, and I wasn't told that I can't talk about it, so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it because it happened, and it's pretty exciting. So a few days ago, I got a voicemail from I'd say a talent scout for a network TV show that asked me if I would be interested in joining the cast of a certain show, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I let the moderators know from Club Mueller's Reef what was going on. And of course, immediately Eric started doing his research and started digging into the internet. And he says, it's legit. This is a real company. This guy really does this for a living. And congratulations. So yesterday, I did a Skype interview with that person. And he filmed the entire thing. And then they're going to edit down everything I said into something shorter to show the network executives. And there's a chance, I mean, I was considered that possibly I could join this show. I don't know how that would work exactly. It would involve flying there for filming and so forth, but it's just the idea is really cool. They really liked what I do here on YouTube. And so, I don't know. I told them, I said, the one thing I'm not is like a polarizing character, because a lot of TV shows, they want someone that's really nutty or has a certain look, and I feel like I'm kind of middle of the line, just straight, straight shooting. I don't know, but I was assured, hey, let's just move on and we'll see what happens. So I don't know. I'll find something out in the next 2 to 4 weeks if it's going to happen, but that would be really cool. And that's all I can tell you. That's all I can tell you. Because I mean, like I said, they didn't say I couldn't say anything, and they did find me through YouTube. So obviously, I talk about things on YouTube. But I would hate to jinx it. I don't know. We're just gonna see what happens. But it would be really cool. Of course, I was emphasizing the things I really believe in that interview, and so hopefully they see the same value and quality of what I was discussing and think, yes, we want to use you. That'd be really cool. And all I was thinking in the back of my head was, this is new neck money. So I don't know. We'll see. That's it. All right. So that's what I did yesterday, and I hope, to have some good news. But, even if it doesn't work out, it's still really cool that I was even considered. And I do like that. So I'm just gonna kind of, I don't know, cross my fingers and see where things go. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? All right. So that is it for today. It's a very short stream in what I have to talk about, because I didn't have like some big... We have talked about pretty much everything under the sun, it feels like. And the only thing to talk about these days, without repeating old streams, is really to go into, only talking about new products each time, which that's not always beneficial either. I mean, there's an audience for that, but there's others that just need the basics. They just need some hand-holding and some questions answered, and that's the point of the live streams, and that's why we do it. And I was just looking at the last few live streams, let's say the last 5 or 6, and on average 6,000 to 12,000 people watch them despite the length of these streams, where I know we've been going longer and longer, and I actually need to cut them back. I have to. But the constant comments I see are not, it's too long, it's, can you make them longer? And man, I don't know. I think it gets too repetitive or redundant in that fashion. I think we should, kind of keep it reasonable. And so, today we'll do what we do, but I feel like this is gonna be shorter so I can get some more work done. So that is something that's I want you guys to consider. So let's do this. Okay, so when you do the question, thank you, Andreas. You just said what I was about to say. Whenever you ask a question now in the live chat, go ahead and type @MilovsReef and then your question so I can see it. And that way I can go ahead and spot your questions a little bit more easily. I'm going to scroll up now and take a look at what everyone said and start answering your questions. And if more stories pop in my head, of course, I will share them with you. Let's see. David L. asks or says, you got the Trident reagents out fast. Thanks. Yes, I have been ordering them nonstop from Neptune, and every time I order some from them, they tell me, well, you just got some. I said, I know, and I sold them. I need you to like put me on a constant rotation. Just keep bringing them to me, like a regular cycle. And I even said, can I just order like 100 kits? And that way I've just got a pallet's worth. And he said, if you ask for 100, you're definitely not going to get it because it takes forever to do that. So I've been ordering in smaller quantities, trying to keep the flow of reagents to the shop so I can sell them to you. And that one was the last one I had on the shelf, and I have more in transit, and I placed an order again for even more to stay in line so they keep sending me reagents. I'm selling a lot of reagents. I'd love to sell some Apex gear, so if you guys need any Apexes or PMUPs or pH probes, PM1s, I have a lot of those parts in stock, and I'd like to get them out of my shelf, off my shelf, and into your hands so you can use it. And, it just, your tank would benefit from running with an Apex controller, and it's what I've been doing since 2004. Every single tank I've had since then has been on a controller by Neptune Systems, and it's helped with everything. So I highly recommend it to you guys. And I use it, and that's why I believe in it, which is why I'm finally now selling it. And I think I only started selling the Neptune gear I started selling it like 9 months ago, and yet I had the ability to do it a year before that, and I just didn't do it. So there's more stuff probably on my rack to sell, then it's even on the website. You know, some smaller components like leak sensors and stuff. And yes, Crisis Film says you need a fisherman's cough drop. Fisherman's friend cough drop? I definitely need a cough drop. I agree. I should have done that before I got started. Let's see. Right now we're 211 people in the live stream. And you know what? Bud's Lounge, let's do that. I'm going to, Andrea, if you're writing this down or keeping a list or something like that, let's get one copy of Choral to Bud's Lounge, and he's going to cover shipping, which is great. And I'll get that out on Monday. Now I need to buy some manila envelopes. That's okay. Thanks for asking. Jessica says, will you be videoing Spock's vet visit? Yes. One of the fifth things I asked the vet after 4 of the questions was, can I film this if everything goes well? And she said, yeah. And I was like, okay, good. I mean, you know, if things go badly, I don't know, if some horrible thing happens, I probably won't show video of that. But I'm hoping for the best. And, you know, she's got a pretty solid reputation. But I'm hoping that I can show some kind of cool stuff she's doing. If anything, it promotes her business, and if it helps Spock, that would be great. So we'll see what happens. You know, she might just say, you know what, let's just leave her alone. You know, sort of like when you take your dog to the vet, and the vet's like, yeah, everything's okay. Let's just give him some new flea medicine and move on. You know, so it could be something as simple as that. But if the eye could be fixed, that would be great. Okay, I did not get this ready before the stream, so let me find it really fast. I was asked to share something on social media, so we might as well start with you guys. I just need to find it really fast. Okay, I'm getting closer. I don't know if you should, someone asked, should we put up an email? Let Andrea figure out how to do all that stuff. Obviously, I don't want to put your personal information out on the World Wide Web. So, this event coming up, looking for the factoids, because I didn't memorize anything. Okay. So March 21st, and I'm going to put the link in the chat right now, is going to be the Greater Niagara Choral Show 2020. And I am going to be one of the people there. I believe I'm speaking. I don't think I'm just there. So I'll be one of the ones speaking at this event. And it's a big deal. They're going to have 50 vendors, industry speakers. I think I'm one of them. And thousands of happy clients. I like that. So, you know, it's a 2-day event, and there's a general admission for $20. You can get a weekend pass for $35. It'll give you a chance to go around everywhere and talk to vendors and learn more stuff and meet some of your favorite authors and speakers, and you know, ask questions in person. I mean, that's the whole point of these shows. So you definitely want to go to this if you can. It's one of the things I always emphasize, that please, please, please go to any choral show you can go to that's within driving distance. And so if you can get in your car, please do it. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, when a person organizes an event, like MACNA, Reefapalooza, Aquashella, they promise all these vendors, a lot of people are going to show up. And then the vendors spend a lot of money to bring all of their inventory in. They set up a booth. They have to get hotel rooms for the night before and that next night. And, you know, they got to deal with flights or freight. There's a lot going on. And I've noticed over the years that some people will choose not to go just because it's easier to stay home than get in your car. And yet they're cheating themselves out of a really good opportunity to hang out with fellow fish nerds. And it really is important to go to these events, because the more warm bodies in the building, the happier the vendors are. Even if you aren't buying, just the fact that you're there, they feel like it's really busy and active. So it's kind of a psychological thing. If, for example, there was 50 vendors and 10 of you showed up, and that was it, just 10, you would have the pick of the litter of anything in the building. Yes, you'd have the best opportunity to buy things, and odds are you would get what you wanted. But the vendors would be very frustrated, and they would tell each other, hey, if they ever do an event again, I'm not going to do it, and I think you shouldn't do it. And you see, it kind of implodes the event that happened in your local area. So I'm emphasizing whenever there's an event in your area, if you can go, I do recommend you go. And odds are you're going to find something you want, whether it's test kits or stainless steel tools to grab your frags, or actual corals, sometimes fish. It could be fish food. It could be samples. There's so much to do. And then a lot of these events are being family friendly, where they're including things like face painting and a kids zone where the kids can play with something, and that's aquatic related usually. And so it kind of becomes a day or a weekend trip for you and your family to enjoy something different than staring at an aquarium or watching YouTube videos or going to work. So I would definitely recommend that you go to the Niagara Coral Show. I've actually never been to Niagara Falls. This is my first time that direction, so I'm excited for that because it's new for me. And I will get to meet some of you that I've not met before. I'm sure of that because you aren't coming to Mackinac or you aren't coming to Reefapalooza. And so by my going to different shows, there's an opportunity for me to meet more of you than previously. So I do recommend you go, and if you can, you should. So I put the link in this chat, and I'll stick it in the video's description as well, so it's later. If you're listening to the show later, you can just go to the video's description, click the link, and it'll get you right to the official page. So please go. That's all I gotta say. I know that was long, but it's an important topic, and it shouldn't be ignored. All right. Where did I leave off in this chat? Oh, I let this thing scroll way, way, way down. Let's see. All right. I talked about the Versa. Fellow Reefer, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And yeah, I keep doing this for you. I mean, I know some people think it's self-serving when you do these type of channels, but I really do try to focus on answering your questions and sharing what I know as much as I can so that you can have equal success. And I believe I see your tank in your profile pic. Let me make this bigger. Come on, there we go. I'm trying to look at it. I like that stand. Okay, guys, if you're looking at this right now, you can see that there's a small tank on a really large cabinet. There's a huge benefit to doing that. So if you haven't done that before, it's worth considering. I just recently had a phone call from a potential client this week saying, Mark, I bought a half-round aquarium with a half-round stand and a half-round canopy, and there's 12 inches by 7 inches of room for a sump. And I said, no, there's not. I said, that could be a top-off container, but that definitely is not room for any kind of a sump. Period. It's not going to work. And the tank, I think, was around 66 or 70 gallons of water. So that little 12 by 7, even if it was a tall container, there's not enough room for water to pour down other than maybe pour into a filter sock and push back up. So all you're doing is trapping particulates. I mean, that's it. There's no room for a protein skimmer. There's definitely not room for baffles. It's just not possible. So I suggested, can you build a new stand that's bigger and put it in the same spot, and then put the half-round tank on top of that, and maybe leave the canopy because it matches the shape of the tank, but the bottom would be larger, and you'd have a place to put things down. Plus, you'd have a bigger cabinet area underneath for a larger sump, top-off container, electrical considerations. And so I actually like oversized stands. When a stand is, even if it's 5 inches larger on each end and then 5 inches in the front, it gives you this nice wraparound bar to put down test kits, put down your drink, set down your camera. It's great. Plus, if you have to work in the tank, you can stand on that area and reach down inside, or kneel on it, and you can reach in your tank. So if you can go with a slightly larger stand, there's actually a huge benefit. And I know a lot of everything we see these days, like Red Sea tanks, the tank, the stand, everything is exactly the same size. It's very sleek, very European looking, very modern and clean. But going a little bit larger, as long as the stand has been built properly, would actually benefit you as a hobbyist because you're creating more space underneath and you are creating work area around the tank where you never have anything to put anything down. How many times have you held something in your hand, you're looking to the edge of the tank and the tank's rimless? You can't put it there, and the overflow box is open, you can't put it there, and you're just, let me put it on the step ladder, and then you step on the step ladder and it rocks and falls over. So having that work surface, that shelf, is really actually pretty awesome. And it's what I did with my 280-gallon reef. I had a nice little 4 or 5 inch shelf that went around the front and the side, and it worked out really, really well. So, it's something for you guys to maybe consider to make your hobby a little bit easier. Charlie says, my girlfriend Kelly has asked if there's a group for women who have lost their other halves to the reefing hobby. Chippendales? It's the only club I can think of. And that's coming from a former professional stripper. Hey, Crisis Films is actually at his LFS watching the stream. Nice. Jason, I will be shipping these media mail. Absolutely. But it has to be US. That's the one thing I didn't know. Tom, thank you for liking this channel. I appreciate that. Let's see. Neil says, I had a tough week. I lost 10 fish to ick. I'm going to leave it fishless and work on the corals. Yeah, that's pretty much what you have to do. And you're probably going to have to leave your tank fallow or fishless for at least 6 weeks. Some go even farther. They go much longer, maybe 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. They want to eradicate any possibility of any remaining ick in the tank to starve off from a lack of fish. And your new fish should go through quarantine and make sure they're healthy before they're introduced. You're kind of getting an opportunity to reset and eliminate ick once and for all. And if you are buying fish and buying fish and buying fish, I think you should this time consider actually running a quarantine tank where you put brand new fish in for at least 21 days for observation purposes only. And those new fish will be in that small box of water. You got to change the water every single day, 10%. And you're going to have to observe the fish and you're going to feed the fish. But the nice thing is these fish are going to be fed in a smaller body of water. You can observe them to make sure they're eating. You can train them to like the foods that you offer. And then when you put these nice healthy fish in your tank, you don't have to worry about there's going to be ick in your tank now. And you don't have to worry about the ick spreading from fish to fish. But if you just grab a new fish from the fish store and it looked healthy, and even if you put it through safety stop and then you throw it in the tank, there's a chance some of it's going to get through. So that's hard. In the meantime, because your tank is fishless, your corals will not be getting the daily fish poop on them, which is their form of food. So make sure your corals are being fed appropriately. You might have to use something like Benereef, which I sell. You can, of course, use larger meatier foods like mysis, and you can put that on various polyps by either slowing down the flow or stopping the flow for like 5 minutes to focus the food. The nice thing is, at this point, you don't have fish stealing food, so a little bit goes a long way. You don't want to overfeed the corals. Just once or twice a week should be enough. And that way you don't end up with some kind of an algae bloom or cyano breaking out or something like that from the excess food hitting the water because you're trying to compensate. So it's kind of a tricky balance. You're going to have to find just a little bit of food for them goes a long way, is what I was saying before. And if you have things like skunk, cleaner shrimp, peppermint shrimp, blood shrimp, they may steal the food from certain corals. I don't know what kind of corals you have, but if you have things like lobos that are slow eaters, the shrimp will reach over, they'll actually reach down the mouth of the loba and pull the food right back out, even after it took 45 minutes for that coral to inhale it. And they'll just reach in with their little claw and pluck it out and run away. And I've tried things like feed the shrimp first, so he's got a big chunk of meat in his hand, and then go feed the coral. And he would drop that to go steal it, just like a cat would do. It's crazy. I'm laughing because Eric says he's playing the cancer card. I want a magazine. Let's see. Claudius says, how's it going with your Trident? Have you ever tried to calibrate it on the first usage? I was wondering if I should wait to calibrate mine or not right now. It was slightly off. Okay, so when you set up the Trident and you install all your reagents and you prime it with tank water and you hook up your waistline, it is now going to initialize, and it's going to take like 50 minutes or so to go through that whole process. And then every 6 hours, it's going to do some tests. You are supposed to wait 48 hours of testing before you calibrate. So you don't calibrate a brand new one, you let it run, and then you do your calibration per the Neptune Systems instructions. And then hopefully you will see a slight change in your graphs, and you'll know that things are accurate, and you can double check with your test kits. API is not, he said, in comparison to my API test kit in his next comment. The downside is API is not super accurate. And there are different brands of test kits that are more and more accurate, and Trident is supposed to be like the gold standard of accuracy. That's the what they're telling us. So I don't have this by heart in my head, but I've seen some graphs that were shown in presentations by Terrence at Neptune Systems, and he showed how you've got your test kit chart, and you're saying your alkalinity, for example, is 9 DKH. And then it says with that test kit, there's a plus or minus room for error that could be this wide. And then a different test kit had a smaller margin, and then the Trident had a little itty bitty margin of difference. So when you say, well, my test kit that has a wide range, it showed me at 9, so I should be good, it could actually be 10 or it could be 8 because it's such a wide margin. But with a test kit that's tighter, it's plus or minus 0.5, and then the Trident might be plus or minus 0.1 or something to that. Like I said, I didn't memorize it. I just saw it, heard it a couple times, made sense to me. I didn't actually try to verify that one for myself at this time, but at some point I will when I have some free time, which I have so much of. But yeah, the answer to your question is you don't want to calibrate immediately. You want to wait at least 2 days, maybe 3. And you don't have to calibrate every time you put a new bottle of reagent in there. Typically, most people change or do the calibration test when they replace all 3 bottles at once. Aaron says, how big should a Refugium be for a 120-gallon tank with Kessel lighting for nutrient reduction? I've always recommended that a Refugium be at least 10% of the display tank. So you're looking at a Refugium that's 12 gallons, which is actually pretty big. But if you have the room for it, that'd be great. And if you can go bigger, even better. And then when it comes to growing macroalgae under that light, a lot of people are mix-mashing information and kind of they are actually stunting their success rate because of the mix-up of information. So there are a couple of species of Caulerpa that need to be lit 24 hours a day. Otherwise, they will go sexual, which means they bleed out all the green fluid. They become crystal clear. I mean, you can see right through them like rubber, and then or like a gummy bear. And then it just dissolves, and it's all in your system again. And your water turned green, and the plants died, and they don't come back from that. When they go sexual, they're gone. But it's only like 2 species that does it. And there's other Caulerpas like the one I have, which is feather Caulerpa, absolutely cannot go sexual, and it does not need 24 hours of light. People were doing 24 hours of light to prevent that species of Caulerpa from going sexual. And it did, it worked. The plant would just stay green all the time, and I don't even know how it survived, to be honest, because that's not natural at all, right? It's not like what's in nature. And Caulerpa came from nature, so it's not like we invented this plant. But anyway, Chaetomorpha and feather Caulerpa are a couple that only need like 9 hours of light a day. So if you're setting up a refugium and you're growing out these plants under 9 hours of light per day, and some people like to run it from all night while the main tank is off, that's totally fine. That's a good way to buffer up your pH. But then once a month, you need to remove some of the macroalgae and share it with someone else or throw it away. One of the recommendations in California, if you have Caulerpa, which is deemed illegal, is to freeze it in your freezer overnight and then put it in the trash. That way, if any bit of it happens to somehow end up in the ocean, it won't continue to spread out there, because they had a massive Caulerpa outbreak in the California waters, and that's why it became illegal to have. So in that state. So removing some of the macroalgae and then pulling apart what's still left encourages more growth. And as the plants continue to grow, they remove nutrients. So if you just grow it and never pull anything out, you don't remove any nutrients. You're just growing plants, which kind of keeps the nutrient level the same. So you got to go in and reach and remove some. And so yeah, if you can go with 12 gallons, you can go 20 gallons, you can go with 40 gallons, your tank should benefit more and more and more. Someone mentioned here, Nick says that he felt like the Kimura was too pricey. And when I saw it, I actually thought that thing is amazing. I'm talking about this one right here. When they came out with this, I was so excited. Choral View started selling it. And when they told me, I think they told me it was going to be $360 or something like that at the time when it released. And I was like, take my money. And that sounds like a lot. But the big one I was talking about, the Masterflex, which is the preferred device, way more than feeding with a MaxiJet or something like that. It was a huge hospital-grade medical dosing pump. And mine was a dual head, which meant 2 heads are spinning at the exact same time. And I bought it used, And I'll tell you, those things are so expensive that usually getting one, I got a good deal because it was a local hobbyist, but usually when you're searching for those on eBay, you're looking at $1,200 for one that's used. So to have something this small for like 300 bucks, I was super excited. And then CoralView said, no, actually it's a little less than you thought. I think it ended up being $280. The new one that's Wi-Fi based, so it's got an extra chip inside, that one is $299, probably $99, or what I call $300. So it is a little bit up there. Compared to like the single head, but this is a continuous duty pump. It's designed to run 24 hours a day, never overheat, never fail. That's the whole point of that pump. And so it's going to cost more than like the Kimor X1, which is a small dosing pump that runs for a few minutes every so often. And those are only 60 bucks. So it's cheaper, but you can't use it for a calcium reactor. So if you're running a calcium reactor, you need continuous duty. This is the pump for that. Some people that are using, we've talked about the Versa earlier in the stream. Some people are using the Versa for calcium reactors, but others are wanting to, again, everyone's trying to automate their water changes. So if you are using it for that, you want to make sure that the two pumps that are drawing water out and putting water in are the exact same calibration. So that way you don't have one pulling out, let's just say 6.1 gallons comes out and 6.4 gallons goes in. You wanted to make sure that the two are the exact same. And according to Devin's video, he's saying they're calibrated right out of the box, which is great. But I'm sure at some point we do need to go in and double check and make sure that they are operating exactly as programmed, or make any kind of small adjustments so that they do align for those automatic water changes. And since I'm talking about automatic water changes, which was not the question, I do want to also emphasize that if you choose to do that, which is totally fine, and I totally understand why people want to do it, my biggest piece of advice is that you check your salinity every single week, no matter what. Because when you do automatic water changes, things get a little bit out of hand. And basically what's happening is you're pulling water out, you're putting water in, your top off may not be off during the water change, so it could be adding fresh water. Your protein skimmer is removing salt water on a regular basis. It could even overflow and into a waste collector and pull out a gallon or two of water, and your tank replenishes with top-off water to refill it, and your automatic water changes are happening, and you're assuming everything is the same. Please don't assume anything. Water test Saturday is a thing, and that even includes checking salinity. And we're looking for 1.026 specific gravity or 35 ppt, which is parts per thousand. And we want to make sure that it's one of those two numbers. Those are the numbers I recommend. There's people that run their cylinder a little lower. The one thing I want to emphasize is that you're not trying to keep your tank 1.035. That's much, much, much too high. It's 1.026 is specific gravity. Or it's 35 ppt. Two totally different measurements. It's sort of like comparing centimeters to inches. Got to make sure we're talking about the same thing here. The distance is still the same whether you're counting the millimeters or you're counting it to the inch, but the difference is the numbers are not the same. So 1.026 or 35 ppt is the reef level I recommend. All right. Nick, I need to know more about your protein skimmer. He says, I'm setting up a new tank and I'm thinking about using the Versa to supply my skimmer. Either that or just run it off my manifold. What kind of a protein skimmer are you running that needs a feed pump? Because most protein skimmers have a pump on the outside or embedded in the body of the skimmer that sucks water in from the surrounding area inside the sump. Or maybe you're running an external skimmer adjacent to the sump. Then you would need a feed pump, but I don't think the Versa would supply enough water fast enough. I think you're going to need a little bit more, whatever the gallons per hour recommended for that protein skimmer. LJ says, are there people who have run the Versa for over a year on a calcium reactor? That I don't know. It's pretty much a brand new product to the market, but I'm sure there's been beta testers using them for longer than that. I'm not sure who those people might be, but we do know that it's been out. It was on display at MACNA, and it became available, oh man, I feel like it became available the first of the year, so we've only had it for about a month and a half as a regular thing you can buy on the market. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens over time. Of course, I'll give you guys an update just like I do with everything I use. Crazy Lynn says, does Mark have a video on dosing copepods? No, but I filmed clips of me pouring in copepods into my Refugium, and they just never got uploaded. So I'll have to put that somewhere. Maybe what I'll do, because it's such a short, like 20-second clip, instead of uploading a 1-minute video to YouTube, maybe, I mean, it'll be on YouTube, it'll be buried into my website where it's connected to the copepod picture in Critter ID, and then you could see a video of the pods and me pouring them in. But basically, when you want to add copepods to your aquarium, wherever you're getting them from, you're getting them from Algae Barn or from Reef Nutrition or somewhere, you want to acclimate them to the same temperature as the tank. And I like to add them to the tank after lights out. But if you're pouring it directly into the refugium zone, there's no competition, so it doesn't really matter what time of day you're doing it. But you want to slow the pumps down temporarily to get the pods added so they can get down into the rock work, into the sand, into the macroalgae, and then restart the pump so you don't just like flush them right through and send them through the pumps and into the tank where they'll be devoured instantly. So you want to make sure that your addition of putting copepods in the tank is beneficial and not just wasted effort and money. If you are going to pour them directly into the aquarium, like for a mandarin fish, then you're going to want to stop the flow in the tank and maybe pour it, if it's like a little bottle or something like that, or a bag, you could maybe lower it in the tank right by the rockwork and then kind of just release it right near the rocks so that they have a way to attach really quickly and get out of sight. But again, I would like to do that at night. Oh, Martinez, I just want to tell you, I saw your email come in yesterday about some products, and I will get back to you. I wanted you to know I saw it. I just haven't had a chance to reply. Aftershokz says, I have a buttload of Astorina starfish, and I want to get a harlequin shrimp, but I have various wrasses. Will the shrimp be safe, or is there an alternative to the shrimp, please? It depends what kind of wrasses you have. I had harlequin shrimp in my tank with a lemon meringue wrasse. I think that was the only wrasse in my tank at the time, and nothing happened. I mean, I didn't catch it, eating them. But they definitely do eat Astorinas. The alternative is to manually remove them yourself, and that just means using tweezers or forceps and plucking them out, as often as you can to reduce their population. I believe there's an article coming out about them very soon in Coral Magazine. Jamie, thank you very much for the super chat. And they said, I took delivery on a Deltec CRRT 1500 calcium reactor yesterday. I'll let you know how quiet it is. Jake from Reef Builder said it's silent. Well, that's great. Deltec makes some really nice gear, and I've seen it on display at many MACNAs. They aren't showcasing at MACNAs like they used to. They used to have these massive booths, and every single thing they brought looked like a droid from Star Wars. And I mean, they had one big fat little stubby thing that it was a protein skimmer, and it just looked like an R2 unit to me, and I wanted it so bad. And it was crazy expensive, a couple $1,000s for a protein skimmer, maybe more. And this was 12, 14 years ago. So it was a lot of money. And but they were considered one of the best brands to buy at that time. And so, I know they're still around. I just don't know if they're doing any shows anymore. Maybe they only show at Interzoo in Germany, since they're based out of there. Should I take this call? Why is this not on silent? All right. These people should know I'm doing a live stream. Let's see. Remember, if you're asking a question, put @Milev's Reef in your question so I can find it. Glenn, you got it so close. He said, @MarkMilevs. I have half a bag of live sand left in the bag, which has been kept outside under a cover. It's been quite cold outside. Will all the bacteria, the good bacteria, be killed off now if I use it? No, probably not. Usually those are sealed and they have a little bit of moisture. I mean, I guess if it's completely dried out, there may not be much life, but some of the bacteria in the bag is activated with oxygen. So it depends in what condition, how you packed it. Is it rolled tight? Is it taped shut? Was it just kind of like folded over a little bit? It might just be sand at this point. You might get some life out of it. It might be a surprise, sort of like hatching brine shrimp from old brine shrimp eggs. You're like, oh, they actually still work. It's a possibility. but no guarantees. If you're really concerned, you might just want to buy a fresh bag and use this for something else at some point. Aftershock says, what's a good clean flake food or pellet food I can put in my auto feeder for my Antheus? Flake food. Actually, probably flake or pellet would be PE mysis. They make a really nice food. I think I have a pouch right here. Just a second here. So this is a pellet food made by PE mysis, and this one here is the 1 millimeter size. You can see the little pellets right there. And that one there is full of nutrients. This would work well, shouldn't clump up badly. It's slow sinking, which means as it hits the water, it will not just drop to the sand instantly, so the Antheus can gobble it up. And if you're using an auto feeder, I definitely recommend some kind of a feeding chimney, which is what I actually sell on my website. And you put your auto feeder on top, and it goes straight through the it goes straight through the chimney, gets the food wet, and then it drizzles into the tank. And it doesn't just float across the surface and go into the overflow and into the sump or into your filter sock or into your Clarisy. So I do recommend that. And I think that that would probably be a good choice. And like I said, they have a flake food as well. The flakes might be too big. You might have to just see how it plays. You know, I would actually take the auto feeder away from the tank, and I would put it like over a paper plate in the kitchen, set it up, and put in your different foods and hit the start button and just see what it does and see if the flakes are coming out properly or if you need to stick to pellet food. Ash says, any tips on keeping up with a 40-gallon with only 8 hang-on-back equipment? It's not unlike any of the other tanks that we run. I mean, just because the equipment's hanging on the back versus hiding in a sump underneath, you just got to maintain your equipment, make sure it's clean, make sure that it's wiped down, inspect it to make sure it's operating properly. 40-gallon tanks are still a nice size compared to smaller nanos, but you still have to stay on top of water quality. The smaller the tank, the more attentive you have to be to your water quality because it can get away from you pretty quickly. Temperature and salinity are the two big changes on small tanks. So on your 40-gallon, you might want to make sure those two are completely covered for the entire year, winter and summer, because the temperatures fluctuate so greatly. Your house temperature could be quite a bit lower in the winter, and the tank might get too cold. But other than that, no. I mean, you should be able to run a really nice tank with hang-on-back equipment. It's kind of an eyesore. People don't like to look at that normally. But if that's the only choice you have, that's just what it is. It's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of people doing it. And then think about this. There are people out there that have no equipment on the tank at all. They'll have some power heads and the heater lying in the back somewhere. But they are only operating off of water changes. No protein skimmer whatsoever. No dosings. And of course they're running, like, usually when you see those types of tanks, they're almost always, I hate to use absolutes, but almost always it's a softy tank. They're very forgiving, they're very resilient. They've got Rickordias, they got Zinnia, they got Green Star polyps, they might have a clam. But I mean, it's for the most part, it's a very simple system to where the corals they've chosen don't absorb a lot of the calcium alkalinity, so it can be maintained just through the simple use of a water change, because the new batch of salt water going in will provide what was lacking or what was consumed during that week, and so they can maintain a pretty decent system. And I've seen some that were bigger. There was a fish store here in our area, they're gone now, but they had one tank and their whole sales pitch was like, this beautiful reef never has a water change or only operates with water changes, we don't use any kind of gear. And it was almost like he was trying to prove it was possible. I mean, with enough willpower, we can do pretty much anything. But when it comes down to ease of maintenance, gear does help, and I do like it. So if you have good gear hanging on the back of your tank should do well. Let's see. Ziggy commented on my potential neck money. He says, Daddy needs some neck money. Too funny. Oh, Deal, thank you very much for the super chat. He writes, Pear character cheerfully blowing a party horn. Thank you. Let's see. Glenn says, I have 3 mangroves growing in the aquarium. The roots are growing long, and is it okay to cut back the roots, or will they die if I do that? I wouldn't touch the root system of a mangrove. Mangroves are a really cool plant to grow. I haven't had like super success on those. In other words, I've grown it for like 6 or 8 months, but I didn't like move the light higher and higher as the plant got taller and taller. And so eventually, it just kind of got neglected. It couldn't get enough light, and then it started to wither away. But there are others out there like Julian Sprung that can grow an entire bush mangrove, like a mini tree. And he does it with a plant, he does them in the cubes with a bunch of sand, and the roots just grow. I mean, that is the point of the mangrove, the roots. Because the roots are being used to absorb water, and it's actually absorbing, it's sort of like an RO filter. It's only absorbing the fresh water, and it doesn't let the salt permeate the roots. So if you cut roots, I would think that you're going to actually leave an opening where the water's not going through the root system like it should, because there's this gaping hole in the roots you've cut. I would not touch them. You might be able to redirect them a little bit, kind of like tuck them behind a rock or something maybe, but or start a separate tank literally for mangroves and fill it up with a bunch of sand, and then put in some other cool critters that you might like to see crawling around inside that tank. Maybe have little tiny fish swimming in through the roots. That would be a really cool display by itself. And like I said, as the plant grows, you have to raise the light higher and higher. Macy's daddy says, can you shine a light on the different types of acropora? Is there a site that will let you know if they are branching or tabling, etc.? Oh, I bet there is such a website. A lot of times when we're Googling different corals, there are specific ones that will come up in Google first, like AIMS. They are like a scientific website. Unfortunately, I never feel like they have enough pictures. It's like all these words and genuses and all this stuff, which is great for scientists. But for me, I want to see 30 pictures of that coral. I want to see the dead skeleton. I want to see the living skeleton. I want to see it on the reef. I want to see it in an aquarium. I want to see the different ways it can appear. And so, that is one way of learning about corals. There's a book called Corals written by Eric Bornemann that I have on my bookshelf. Great book that will teach you everything you need to know about acropora and montipora and other corals as well. But acros specifically, there's a ton of information. The book's about this thick. Lots of pictures, lots of good documentation. Definitely not so intense that it's completely over your head. It's a serious read, but it could benefit you. And I did a live stream about acroporas specifically probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And that one, we covered a lot of information about them. But for the most part, acroporas have the same needs, no matter whether they table or they encrust or they grow out like staghorns. I mean, there's so many different, they have like 5 or 6 different potential shapes, I think. And there are certain ones that are more sought after compared to others. Like the blue tort was super, super popular back in the day. You don't hear a lot of people talking about it, and yet I love that I have 2 of them growing in my tank. So, people tell me, well, you love old school corals. I'm like, yeah, I'm not thinking Homewrecker and Walt Disney. I'm thinking blue tort, or I'm thinking green slimer. And these, like I said, they've been around forever. Everyone could grow them, and I couldn't. So now I'm finally growing them. I don't know what changed, but now they're doing really well in my tank. So that's really nice. I mean, I started with a couple of frags, I think, from Dwayne. And now, they're, I don't know. It's hard to describe the size, but maybe they're approaching the size of a grapefruit, maybe almost a cantaloupe. So that's pretty cool. Calypso says, what are your thoughts about Vibrant? I don't have any. I've never used it, so I can't give you any information. Sorry. Tyler says, I have a green plating and red plating montipora that may touch soon. Should I just see what happens? That's kind of my approach. I'd rather not intervene until I absolutely must. And you might actually see the 2 montipora, since they're plating, they might even be the scrolling kind. They may scroll through each other and continue to have their colors and kind of have that mixture. They might even spiral together, which is kind of cool too. So I would just see what it does. I wouldn't expect two Monteporos to just start attacking each other like crazy because they're the same family. So odds are they'll be okay. I'm reading this long one. Okay, Lefty says, I'm new to saltwater and I'm in the early stages of designing a reef tank. I like the Peninsula 140 gallon style tank. Then he says, so I'm thinking 55 gallons or 75 gallons standard. So you're shrinking the Peninsula down to a smaller tank. Would a hang-on Refugium work? Well, you talked about Peninsula. Peninsula means it's up against a wall and you can walk around three sides. So that means the short end of the tank, because they're not that wide, because they're longer, it's a rectangle, is going to have a lot going on, and you may not have the room for all of that plus a hang-on back Refugium. I'd almost rather see you go with that style tank, but drain down into a sump that has a Refugium. Or set up a second tank nearby, or a second stand nearby with the Refugium on it, so you have a Refugium, which is like a planted tank, and you have your reef, and you could enjoy both. And you could tinker with both, and it'd be kind of fun. I saw one really beautiful Refugium type setup that was set up nice and high, like I was describing just now. Actually, I've seen a couple, but the one I was talking about just now that I saw, the front of it was angled. The guy had made it out of glass, and he actually put in seahorses in there. So he had macroalgae and seahorses, and they were something he could look at every single day, and they could turn and look at his reef, and I was like, that is beautiful. And so I totally copied that tank. I grabbed some acrylic, and I made one, and it ended up being a really cool, popular tank right by the front door of my house. When people walked in, they saw it, and it was very popular because the front panel was angled, so you could look straight down, so to speak, through water, and see clams and corals and anemone and clownfish and gorgonians and whatever I jammed in there. It's actually the longest page on my website. It goes for miles, and it takes forever to load on a phone, I'm sure, unless you have some really good Wi-Fi. So heads up. But if you look up the angled tank, you'll see the shape of that tank, and it ran for about 3 or 4 years. And the only reason I took it down is because the plumbing from that tank went through the wall that then continued to this tank, which was the 280 gallon tank. And when I redesigned this room for the 400 gallon, I removed all that plumbing that was going through the wall. I made that a doorway to walk through, and so the angle tank had to go. But that was a really neat tank, and it was all from a Refugium I saw that was the same shape, made of glass. And I thought, man, that's so cool. And I really enjoyed it. It was a fun tank. It's all, like I said, it's on my website. If you go to tanks, and then you'll go to past tanks, you'll find the link straight to the angle tank. William says, have you ever had live rock enhance lower pH? I didn't notice it going down, but it's possible it went down temporarily because when you put live rock enhance in your tank, the tank becomes cloudy because it's releasing the bacteria into the water, which I could see how that might affect it. Did you notice a big swing? I mean, what was the difference? Were you watching with a pH probe? I'd love to hear more about this. Ah, there you are, Martinez. So yeah, I actually replied to you from an earlier comment that I did, and yes, I can, and you may have to pay some tariffs for bringing product into Europe. But other than that, yes, I can. I haven't had a chance to reply to your email yet. Nick says, I just bought 6 resplendent anthias, and they're beautiful fish. Do you have any experience with this type of anthias? No, I don't. I love the lyre tail anthias. I have 3 in my tank, and I'd like to add like 6 or 9 more, to be honest. I just haven't. But I love their look. It's basically a bright orange goldfish with the Cleopatra purple eyeshadow, and I think they're beautiful. But if I was going to get more anthias, I would love to get the ventralis. Absolute stunning anthias. Resplendent, I haven't delved into. It just didn't, we all have certain tastes, a certain fish we like. And if I had the money to blow, I'd probably buy a bunch of ventralis to put in my tank, because I think they would really add, they have some really cool patterns, the males and the females, really, really pretty. They only come up for sale from time to time. They're not regularly available. Crazy Lynn says, when you start dosing copepods, are there any brands that you suggest? Reef Nutrition sells something called Tigger Pods. They're bigger. And then Algae Barn sells smaller ones. There's actually a couple different, there's also Pod My Reef is another company. I think they're based out of Houston or San Antonio, one of those two. And these guys will send you bags loaded with copepods. And, you know, it's kind of crazy because it'll say you just got 5,270 copepods. And I just don't picture anyone sitting there counting them out. I don't know how they come up with those numbers, honestly. But when you hold the bag up to the light, if you look really, really closely, you will see a bajillion dots. So in theory, it's probably accurate. It might even be more than the number says. That, like I was saying earlier, you just want to introduce them when there's no fish there to devour them, and with low flow temporarily, like stop the pumps for a few minutes. And you want to make sure the water temperature is the same before you pour it in so they don't just get shocked and die as soon as they hit the water. Gabe's Reef says, I'm really getting into anemones. What are some things to look for when shopping? Okay, so there's a lot of different kinds, and so that's kind of a hard one to answer because there are carpet anemones, they're in different colors and different price ranges. There are bubble tip anemones, there are long tentacle anemones, there are rock anemones, flower anemones, mini maxies. There's probably even more, and tube anemones. I was going to say there's probably, I'm assuming there may be 20 different kinds, you know, worldwide. And, you know, we tend to focus on 4 or 5 in our hobby. But when you're looking at them, you want to make sure that they are healthy looking. Their mouth isn't just wide open like they're gasping their last breath. They should be holding on to something tightly and not blowing around the tank, even though that looks convenient to remove. But it should be holding onto the glass or holding onto the rock. Most anemones need to be sticky to the touch. So if you were to feed it something, the food would stick to the tentacles and you could pull it in. It'd be nice to see it eat. You know, if you're about to buy it at the fish store, say, can you feed that something so I can make sure it's okay? Might be worth a shot. And then keep in mind too, that when you bring home an anemone and put it in your tank, it may not do well if you have a super aggressive clownfish, for example, because like the maroon clownfish is a bully. It just beats up the anemone. It hits it so hard, it just barrels into it. And I see people buying little tiny anemones, not something big that can handle a clownfish hitting it and putting it through, you know, quite the barrage. But when you've got a little tiny thing and you got this big fish just like crunched on top, like, you know, like Shamu on top of, you know, I don't know, something small. It just doesn't work out. And you could actually watch it kill the thing you thought would be its perfect home. So instead of it saying, thank you, you gave me this awesome home, it beats it to death and you lose the anemone. So you want to make sure it's healthy, you want to make sure it's big enough, or you want to make sure that the fish at home you have are not going to tear it up. You might have to protect it with something temporarily, even if you're putting fish nets over the top to kind of like avoid the fish hitting it at first, or a cage or a divider out of egg crate in your tank so that you can look, but it can't touch until it's really settled in. And then, of course, acclimation. You're going to have to go through regular acclimation of getting it into the tank. And there's a couple of methods I've seen. Some people will take it completely out of the water and lay it on a plate where it kind of deflates and looks like a giant pancake, and then they slip it in the tank. I don't do that. Instead, you know, the anemone came in a bag of water. I will pour out half the water, and I'll float it in the tank, and I'll scoop out some water, you know, like in a small urine cup, and pour that in, whatever that amount of water is, every 7 minutes until the water volume in the bag has doubled. And then I can reach and take the anemone out and place it in the tank. And in this tank behind me, I just drop them in. I don't even try to place them anymore because they're going to go where they want. I've got a rose anemone that's right here in the worst spot possible. And I had another one that was just a little while ago, was up here. And now I see it has moved all the way down to right there. So you just never know where they're going to go. But if you buy a carpet anemone, that one could be so sticky it could eat any fish in your tank. If anything just gets too close, it's dinner. So you want to keep that in mind. If you're worried about losing fish, maybe don't go with the carpet anemone. I love carpets. I think they're gorgeous. The red ones are crazy expensive to me. I mean, I realize numbers are all, everyone's got an opinion on price, but $800 for a carpet anemone sounds crazy to me. And I've heard they're even higher. And then you've got other things out there like black widow bubble tip anemones that are $1,600, $1,800. I'm like, wow, I can't believe someone's willing to pay that. You know, I remember buying a $40 one back in 2003. So to, pay nearly $2,000 for one seems unbelievable. But, to someone else, they're like, totally worth it. I got the best of the best. I'm very happy. So, it's just like I drive a vehicle I like, and there's others that buy, a Maserati. It's the vehicle they like. It just comes down to choice. Rock anemones are beautiful, and they come in many different colors. And when you're trying to buy and you're in a shop that has a whole bunch of them, like let's say 15 or 20 different colors, it's like looking at Skittles, and it's impossible to find the one you want. And you're basically saying, well, how much for 6? How much for 10? How much for all of them? Because it's so pretty, you just want to blanket the bottom of your tank with all of them. And the little rock anemones, they're sticky, they can catch a fish, but most fish know to avoid them. So, there's a chance a goby might get too close and get sucked in. But, that's the risk with any anemone inside an aquarium. Okay, Callie says, what trace element systems have you used, and what do you recommend for someone using ESV 2-part? Number one, ESV 2-part B-Ionic is great. So congratulations on a good choice. I really do like that product. I used it for several years on 2 smaller aquariums. With a bigger tank, I couldn't. It was just too cost ineffective. It just would cost too much to supply my tank, which is why I migrated to the calcium reactor. But other elements you can add, there are trace elements. There's a lot of bottles of different additives available. Red Sea has a whole line. I think it's like A, B, C, D. Trident has a whole bunch of different letters as well. I think Elos has a line. I feel like everyone has a line. So there are different ones you can add, and it depends on what kind of livestock you're keeping and what kind of livestock, what does your livestock need. But if you'll read the bottle of ESV, the B-Ionic says right on it, it includes 70 other elements inside the solution. So when you're pouring that in, you're actually adding a little bit of everything already. You might need to add anything. You might not need to add iodine or molybdenum, however you say that. I never know how to say that one. I've never heard anyone say it out loud. I need to watch YouTube more. But that one's one I can't pronounce. There's iron's another one that some people dose to maintain healthier macroalgae that maybe your tank lacks. Sometimes it's best, before you add anything else, the old school rule was don't ever add anything to your tank you can't test for. Well, now we have ICP testing, so you can test for a lot more stuff. And you could actually see if you're low on something or if you need to add more of something. And so running that, paying for an ICP test might be your next step, so you can decide if you need to even add any trace elements or if everything's coming back good. Dustin says, what are the drawbacks to a cheaper doser like the Jabo brand? Now, I'm not super familiar with their line because I kind of avoid it, just period. I just don't. But I don't know if they have a continuous duty one. That's where I was kind of like, I'm not sure if they have one. But for regular dosing, people do use them. They seem to be happy. Most of the people that talk about owning those, any kind of Jabo product, say, I bought it because it was cheaper and I like it and it's working fine. And they'll say things like, and even if it breaks, I can afford another one because it wasn't that expensive. So yeah, you could definitely go that route. It's not a bad choice. I just chose not to go that direction. I remember when they first hit the market, they were selling pumps dirt cheap that mimicked other pumps. And it was just kind of like, I don't know. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way, only in the fact, I understand we all want to save money. I get it. But it rubbed me the wrong way because it was like a clone of a Tunzi pump. Or it was a clone of this or a clone of that. They'd use the name of a Vortec even though it wasn't anything close to a Vortec, but they used the same name, like MP40. And it kind of bothered me on that level because it just seemed like they were trying to steal the market where the original company existed and invented it and made it and patented it. And now some company, and that's, this is just me with my own personal weird opinions. It's not me telling you what to do or not to do. I mean, like I said, you're going to buy what you want to buy. And I totally get it. And if your tank's happy and if it's working well, that's great. That's all that matters anyway, right? But, for me, it just kind of bothered me that that was going on. And so I just didn't go that route. I've stuck with the gear and the companies that I put my trust in. And they've always been there. Even when I have a problem and I call them and say, hey, I've had this for this many years, I just want to see if you think it's serviceable, or should I just buy a new one? And more often than not, they're like quick to give me a simple solution, or they're happy to replace it. And I just feel like that's important. This tank behind me, I waited 18 months for that tank to be returned to me after it had leaked in 2013. It took 18 months to build a new one. It's super long, ridiculously long. And I was very patient. I pretty much emailed them once every 6 to 8 weeks saying, can I get an update? And all my livestock was in a temporary tank, so it didn't matter. It was just super annoying to have no tank on this stand. It was just empty. There was just a slab of plywood and no tank. And a person could have said, hey, do you know who I am? I can blow you up on social media. I can tell all my friends never to buy from you again. That is not my approach. It never has been. I wouldn't want someone doing that to me, and so I don't do it to them. And so I patiently waited. I got annoyed. That's usually when I wrote the email saying what's going on. And I was sent pretty much every excuse that could be used. At one point, the person on the phone told me, well, Mark, we've used every excuse we have. We don't have any more excuses. We just need to get it done. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great, because my fish and corals could use some space. The frags I saved from the leaking tank were colonies that were running out of room, because I jammed what survived into a 215 that came out of a 400. And a lot of it I lost because of the leak. And yet I didn't blow them up or put them down, and they took care of me. And it could have been, you're on your own. It just, I don't know. The whole honey attracts bees. I don't know. What's the saying? Honey attracts more bees than flies? I don't know. But just be nice. Always be nice. Even when you have a problem with the product, let them know what's going on. See what they recommend. If they say you just got to buy a new one, okay, you buy a new one. It didn't last forever. Oh well. If they can fix it and save you some money or sell it to you half price, you just saved half the money. That's a win to me. So that's my thought. Oh man. Mr. Reefbuster says, what are your thoughts on L-shaped reef tanks? Is that feasible? If so, what would be the largest you'd recommend? Also glass or acrylic? I love the L-shaped tank. And it was one thing I wanted to do in this exact spot for many years. I wanted to have the tank come across this area. And this was a wall at the time. And there was a door over there. And I wanted to have the tank come this direction and then turn right here so I could see it from the living room, I could see it from the dining area, and it was going to be amazing. And I kept debating, how do I want to build it? And I assumed it needed to be made of acrylic. It can be done with glass, but at the same time, glass would be nicer because you wouldn't have to worry about it scratching as easily as acrylic. But acrylic is welded together. It's one piece. It's more durable. It's really going to handle it. So my other thought was to possibly get a rectangular tank. Let's just pretend the 400 was the tank that was going to be an L shape, and then to install a divider that came through the middle of the tank and then turned like an inner L, and then shove it into the wall enough to hide that back area. So basically what would happen would be you'd have the front of the tank, you'd have the side of the tank, but you'd have like your filtration in the hidden part that's kind of in the wall. That was kind of the idea. And I thought, having the tank hang out on the other side of the wall into the room behind it, that's your access to your sump and stuff. And you could even have it drain down into another sump underneath if you needed more room. And I bounced around the different ideas for a long time. There was a guy up in Canada, you can Google his tank. He built a huge L-shaped tank. It was made by ATM. It was beautiful. It had a huge following on Reef to Reef. People loved it, and then one day it leaked. And it burst a seam, and I don't know what happened. I really don't know. I mean, I know they drained it, but I don't know. I don't know who sued who or who fixed what. I have no idea. But it was a great concept tank, and it was beautiful. And I've seen a couple of L-shaped tanks in my travels, and I always enjoy them, and I think they're amazing. So it just comes down to what would work for you. I kind of liked the idea of having an L-shaped tank with two different types of lighting. Now things have changed. When I was dreaming about this, we only had metal halides. And I kept thinking, put metal halides on the big long piece, and then on the end here put VHOs and grow totally different corals in this end of the tank, so you'd have like a whole different exhibit to look at versus, all just continuous, all one reef. I thought that'd be kind of fun. So I was getting pretty creative, but I never ever pulled the trigger on that one. That was kind of this weird dream thing that I thought, this could be amazing or it could be the biggest headache in the world. But it's been done a few times. I bet if you Google a few, you'll find some really cool images on Google Images. I would check that. And then you said the largest size, it all comes down to the quality of the builder. You know, if they do a good job or not. We are up to 276 people in the live chat today. Wow. I should just tell everyone, and we're done. Let's see. Martinez says, have you done phyto and rotifers? I'm thinking about gluing together continuous phyto and rotifer farm for my tank. Continuous may not work. I used to grow phytoplankton. I even tried rotifers a few times, but didn't have much luck. Normally and then I did brine shrimp hatcheries. And so I was growing phyto and I was growing brine shrimp and I was feeding my stuff all the time. The thing about those types of live food stations is they have to be very clean and you don't want to get any kind of cross-contamination. And so setting up something that continuously feeds your tank, there's a good chance something's going to contaminate and crash it. And if the stuff crashes, like the rotifers crash, it turns to flakes, the water is no longer green, it kind of looks yellow and icky. There's a picture of it on my phytoplankton page on my website. You don't want that draining into your tank because it's crashed, it's bad. So I really would prefer, if you were going to do it, and you want to farm it, which you totally can, you can farm the rotifers away from the phytoplankton. You're going to use phytoplankton to feed the rotifers, but you don't want any of that to get back in because they'll devour all your phytoplankton. They're like tribbles. So you've got the rotifers separate. They do their thing. You're going to use a special sieve to pour the water through to catch the rotifers, and then you'll release the rotifers into the tank as live food. Rotifers are basically specks of dust, and they just blow around the tank. They are very, very small. And if you were to preload them with some phytoplankton, the phytoplankton algae molecules will stick to the rotifers. And people that are breeding fish use rotifers to feed baby fish, you know, the fish fry. And they want them to ingest the rotifer because there's phytoplankton sticking to their fur, so to speak. And that way they can get some phyto into the mouths of these fish. So that is one principle. So if you are growing rotifers, if you're growing phytoplankton, you want to then pour that into something that either drips into your tank or doses into your tank, and you refill that. Maybe that could be your automated part, but your farm, your breeding station should be far away from the tank so there's no cross-contamination risk. And when I go to public aquariums and I'm walking behind, they have these massive cylinders of phytoplankton, all these different types of phytoplankton, and then they have their rotifers and they have their brine shrimp, and it's always up against a wall far away from the tank, and then they will drain off what they need for the day and they go distribute it to the various tanks, and they will replenish or grow more of the stuff that's in the big rack against the wall. So that would be my recommendation, rather than something that's literally tied to the tank where you're trying to breed and grow. There's too many things that can go wrong with that. I wouldn't recommend that. I would basically copy what public aquariums do in that regard. So if you can visit one and get a behind the scenes tour, that would be a great time to talk with a marine biologist and see how they're using it specifically and their quarantine or protocols, you know, their methods of using it so that it doesn't crash and it doesn't get contaminated. I know I keep saying that over and over, but it's really important because you don't want to have to restart from scratch every time something goes wrong. Michael says, my tank's DKH is 7.2. But when I test my freshly made saltwater, it's 11. My tank is only a few months old and only has 2 fish and 2 corals. Should I be dosing? Okay, so when you are changing water on your reef, you're taking out 10%, 15%, 25% of the water. And if your tank is at 7.2 DKH, and then you put in that 10%, 15%, or 25% of new saltwater, the higher DKH of the new mixed saltwater will help raise the tank's DKH. 20 minutes after you do the water change, you could test alkalinity and see where the number is now. Some people prefer to buy a salt mix that when it mixes up matches their tank. So they want a salt mix that's 8 DKH because their tank is 8 DKH. And if you are only using salt water for your dosing, you know, for maintaining numbers, you may need the elevated number to keep bringing the tank up every single week because it's going down gradually over time. Right now you only have a couple of corals, so you don't have a big demand. But as you buy more corals and as they grow and become larger, their mass becomes greater, they're going to absorb or need to absorb more, and you could watch your numbers drop even more. It could be down to 6, it could be down to 5 point something, and you're like, oh, I definitely can't just do it with water changes anymore. No matter what the number is, I have to physically dose. So for now, your tank is new, and you're just getting your feet wet, so to speak. So I don't think you need to dose quite yet, but you definitely need to test your water every single week. We have a thing that we've been talking about on this show for a long time called Water Test Saturday. That means today you test your water for everything. Salinity, temperature, pH, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, nitrate, all very important tests to do, and track it. And I use Reef Trace to keep all my information logged. So far, I have not missed 1 week of the year. My goal is to put my parameters in the app every single week for 52 weeks in a row. That is my goal this year. I really want to do it. Speaking of other goals, I'm going to go off topic for just a second, personal goals. I have been working on the activity app for, I'll show you guys this, hang on a second here. Switch to here. I'm working on the activity app on my Apple Watch and my iPhone, and you can see here at the top, I've closed all 3 circles Monday through Friday. My goal is to do that 10 days in a row. So you can see the big circle is the move, the second circle is or the green circle, which has barely started, has not started, is exercise, and the third one is standing. And my goal is to get all of those and to earn a badge. And so right now I'm working on trying to get these 5 badges. So there's the perfect week, of moving, perfect week of exercise, perfect week of standing, perfect week of all activity, and then the February challenge is to close the circles for 10 days, but I want to close all the circles for the entire month, because then I can get this badge right here, and I'm looking forward to getting it. So this is something that I've been working on. I'm down 9 pounds, which is nice, and I am trying to just kind of stick to this. I think the extra exercise has helped my neck a little bit since I didn't have the surgery, and it's keeping me, it's helping a little bit, but it's just, it's personal goals. So the goal for the tank was, to, test water every single week and log it. Personal goal for health-wise is keep up with exercise. And, we all have these little goals, so I always recommend you guys do something like that. I'm sure that, what are some of the goals you set this year? I'd love to hear about them. Dustin says, if I take out all of my pulsing zinnia and Kenya tree coral, will the parameters swing out of balance? No, I don't think so. I think removing soft corals from our tank won't throw it off, but you may have, depending how aggressive you are in removing things, you may have some decay or die-off that could affect, could cause, let's call it a mini cycle. I don't think it's enough to cause a blip unless we're talking about a monster mess that you're dealing with. If you're just going through shredding everything off every rock because it's grown way out of control, yeah, you might see something. You could add something like Prime to the water, which is reef safe, and Prime will lock up anything. It locks up ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, chlorine, chloramine, I think that's all of them. So it's a really good backstop if things are going wrong. And of course, make sure your protein skimmer is working well. And be prepared for water change when you're done, because all the goo and stuff that came off these things you're removing could emanate into the water and potentially cause a little bit of a problem. But it's not going to change parameters. It just might change toxicity levels in the tank because of the aggressive removal. Big Richt, I guess, RCT, says I have a Fowler tank, which means fish only with live rock, and I want to add a coral or 2 to my tank. I have 2 black ice clowns and a 65-gallon aquarium, and I'm working on a sump. You need to test your water and make sure it's ready for corals, because Fowler water is less... it's not being, you're not staying on top of the water quality as much because there's no corals involved. Fish are less demanding is my point. And so you can get away with way worse water quality with a fish-only system with a bunch of rock. But when you try to add corals, that changes everything. So you want to make sure your water quality is good. And you can type into Google, water quality Milev, and it'll take you to my article, which explains all the different parameters, which I was just mentioning in the last comment. And when you get your water right where it needs to be, that's the perfect time to add some corals. The other thing you're going to need to look at adding is more flow to the tank, because odds are you have just a little bit amount of flow for fish only, but corals need some decent flow moving through, some moderate flow, some high flow, some low flow. And you may need to look at addressing the fact that your lighting needs to be more intense. Now maybe you have some really nice light fixtures and you've had them running very dim because it's fish only, thinking that one day you're going to add corals and you could ramp it up, and then you will start to ramp it up. Also, once you've got your water quality where it needs to be and you've increased your lighting, make sure you add a cleanup crew, because the cleanup crew will keep the rocks from growing a lot of algae. And if you do not have a cleanup crew in your tank, you will end up with a lot of algae, and then you'll be saying, how do I get rid of this algae in a future live stream? Rick says, are you going to Reef Currents 2020 in Houston? I hadn't even heard about that one yet. I mean, I've heard of the show, but I don't know when it is. I haven't seen an email about that one yet. I actually need to put everybody's events in my calendar just so I can see when things are. I should have done that already by now, and I haven't gotten around to it. Campaholic says, I've been following you for quite some time now. Thank you for all the helpful information. And how's your new sump? It's great. I love my new sump. I guess it's 6 months old now, maybe a little bit older. I'd have to look at the video. That's when we did it. It's really easy to work in. It's really easy to wipe down. I want to go in there and vacuum out some detritus that's accumulated slowly over time, and kind of get things nice and tidy again, because I like it nice and clean. Last week I kind of wiped down the side of it and stuff, but I didn't have to do anything major, and it was in the live stream sitting behind me. By the way, that live stream sitting on the floor was a terrible idea. Those 3 hours, I was sitting cross-legged on a really thick towel. It was like a beach towel that was folded, I don't know, 8 times, so it'd be kind of thick. I thought, oh, that'd be plenty of padding. Oh my God, no, I was hurting. That was a terrible decision. So yeah, I'm standing in front of the tank today. Let's see. Tam Hodge says, digihydroids. I'm thinking you're talking about digitate hydroids. Is there anything that'll get rid of them off the top of your head? There's a write-up on Reef to Reef that has inconsistent results, so I'm just wondering. They're all over the tank. Okay, so digitate hydroids are a type of worm that throws out or casts a line that looks like a white thread with little nodules, and it throws them out and it jerks them in, and it throws them out and jerks them. It's almost like it's fishing. I'm not sure what it's fishing for besides maybe catching particulates blowing around in your tank, but if you have them all over the tank, you have a lot of food in your tank, and so they are growing in abundance. Some things that we always need in our tank that a lot of people avoid. I just talked to a good friend recently who just completely opposes my feelings on this. And I said, you need hermit crabs. And he goes, no, you don't need hermit crabs. Hermit crabs are evil. I said, yes, you need hermit crabs. Hermit crabs can reach in those holes and pull those worms out and eat them. So having hermit crabs in your tank is important. Having a cleanup crew needs hermit crabs as well. There are some that are more aggressive than others. I never recommend the blue leg hermit because it's too aggressive. Red legs or red-legged hermits are good ones. The scarlets are beautiful, but they're so expensive. I add those for decoration. I don't add them as a cleanup crew item. But having little tiny hermit crabs will help. You can also put a drop of super glue gel over the hole where the digitate hydroid comes out. You could put wrasses in the tank. The smaller you can get it, the better, because they can get into every nook and cranny. So like a yellow coarse wrasse could go in there and devour some. Maybe possibly the copper band, but that's such a hit or miss fish to even keep alive, even if you do everything right, that I can't really recommend it with a good conscience. I've tried many times over the years to get a copper band to live. I had one many years ago that lived 5 years. And but when it died, I could never replace it with one. Nothing would live. And then I got this one that's in this tank now. I've probably had it 1.5 years or so, or maybe longer. I don't know. I need to look at the dates. But I've had it for a while, and it goes after anything, any kind of worm. And so it would eat digitate hydroids for sure. But could you get one that eats and stays alive long enough to do the job? That's kind of doubtful. So you might have to be more manual involved, like I said, going in and sealing the hole where they come out so that they have to just die inside the rockwork. Let's see, we've been at this for 1.5 hours. Stony Reefer says, how long are you staying on today? I think we're going to wrap this up in about 16 minutes or so, 20 minutes. I think we'll go 2 hours. Because like I said, I got some stuff to do. Let's see. Mojave says, speaking of shows, this year I wanted to get more than floor tickets from ACNA. Can you explain to us how do you know who, when, where the guest speakers will be? So MACNA is run by an organization called MASNA. And masna.org has the links to the official MACNA website. So you go to masna.org and go there, and then you can look at the list of speakers. It probably is not the full list for the year because they keep adding more and more speakers, as they get closer to the event. But then eventually the list is done because they have to print the program. And so they need that all in there. They need to have the names of the speakers, the names of the talks, their bios, all that's in it. So you flip through it, you can learn about each speaker. And going to the full show is the way you're supposed to do it. Just getting a day pass to walk through the vendor hall, that's great if you're looking at it like a frag swap. But if you want to go experience MACNA and go to the talks and enjoy the banquet on Saturday night, go to the reception on Friday night and hang out with crazy reef keepers, you'd buy the full package. So I would highly recommend it. And if you haven't bought the full pass yet, buy it like today. Matter of fact, there's probably a Valentine's Day special right now, because we're almost on that holiday, where it might be $10 off. So you could do a search and see if there's a current coupon code available that can save you a little bit of money. But the longer you wait, the higher the ticket price becomes. That's why I always buy my ticket in September at MACNA for the next MACNA, because it's always going to be the cheapest I can get it. You could buy tickets at the door, but they're going to be either the highest price, or it could be there's nothing available for the banquet or the reception because they're sold out. Because there's only so many seats at the banquet, which is on Saturday night. Vitaly says, I've used ChemiClean, 2 doses in a week. I did 3 10% water changes, but the skimmer keeps overflowing. Does it stop on its own, or should I keep doing water changes? Well, 3 10% water changes adds up to 30%, so in theory you should be okay at this point. Basically what you're going to need to do, and I did a really short video about this on my channel. It said, why is my protein skimmer overflowing? How do I make it stop? You can watch that video, but the bottom line is, hook up a hose or remove the cup and dump it into a bucket and put the cup back on and let it do it over and over. Just keep dumping it into a bucket until it stops doing that. And you may end up dumping out 5 gallons. You might be dumping out 10 gallons of collection cup water, but eventually it'll stop. And then make sure your top-off system is turned off while you're doing this, because you don't want to replace water while you're throwing it away so quickly. And whenever you see, like let's say you took out 5 gallons of water, through a couple of hours. You're like, every 10 minutes I had to empty the cup, and now I've dumped out 5 gallons into a bucket. Well, you need to pour in 5 gallons of salt water back into your tank right now and continue. And what'll happen is, this is kind of a hassle for the first few hours, and then it'll get better, and you might go 30 minutes without having to empty the cup, and then finally it's like an hour till you have to empty the cup, and then finally it's just working right. So what you're looking at is maybe a 6 or 8 hour ordeal where you just have to keep babysitting the tank and checking on it. And I kind of think of it like when you're filling up a bathtub, to take a bath, and you turn on the water and you walk away. And then you come back and you check on it and you go walk away. And you come back and you check on it again and you walk away. Because you don't want to just stand there waiting for it to fill up. It takes forever, right? It's the same principle. You're going to check on the collection cup frequently and dump it out. Or if you have the ability, you can hook up a hose to the collection cup and drain it into a nearby bucket. But then you still need to check to make sure the bucket's not overflowing in case it's really, really volcanoing out. Another trick some people do when they're dealing with this specific scenario, instead of using top-off water, they'll put their top-off pump into a bucket of salt water. So as the collection cup is sucking out water, new salt water is going in every single cup. So you could do that. I don't. When I had to do this on my 280-gallon reef and I treated with ChemiClean, I ended up watching my protein skimmer pull out 14 gallons of watery skimmate. I mean, it just didn't look like bad water. It looked slightly oily, I guess. And I just poured in 14 gallons of salt water, and that was it. Skimmer was back to business within 6 hours. So, that's the downside of using ChemiClean. There is a big ordeal, because unless you can do a really big water change, and the little 10% water changes probably didn't cut it. Unless you did like 10, 10, 10, I don't know. I would have tried to pull out 30 at once and put in 30. That might have helped. But sometimes we only have so much space with, like let's say you're using 5-gallon buckets. You can't use, I would have a big trash can of salt water in front of me, not small buckets. It's just too much trouble. You know what? Scott, can you tell me how many, okay, it says 52 liters. That sounds like 12 gallons to me. He's got 2 clowns in there and a ruby red dragonette. Should I stop there? Could I add any others? And if so, what would you add? I would keep the fish load really light on a small tank. Because the more fish, the more pollution. So maybe, I mean, you've got 3 fish in there right now. You might be able to put in a couple more. Maybe like an 8-line wrasse would be pretty. They're small, they don't need a lot of space. Royal Grama might be a little too aggressive toward the other fish. They're kind of territorial, so they're a little bit mean. They'll open their mouth really wide when some fish comes near them, or even when you come near them, because they're like defending my territory. That could work, but I wouldn't add too many fish in there. I would probably add more invertebrates because they're fun to watch. You could get, for example, depending on your water quality, one of the things I really would like to get, and I haven't bought ever, I've seen them at different shows, is the Acropora staghorn hermit crab. And the hermit crab wears this Acropora coral on its back, and the coral walks around the tank. But you have to have really good water quality to keep the coral alive. Just because there's a hermit wearing it doesn't mean water quality doesn't matter. It's really neat looking. I'd like to get it. This tank has a couple of walking dendros behind me that are really fun to watch. They'd be great in a small tank. So little tiny things would be ideal. I would try to avoid things that need a lot of food. Like for example, if you put a sun coral in there, you're going to be feeding it all the time to stay alive, and your water quality is going to go, it's going to get really nutrient rich, and you're going to have algae problems, and it's going to be really hard to clean up. You could add an emerald crab in there because those are fun to watch. An arrow crab would be pretty, but they get pretty big. In a 12-gallon, it might look like a giant spider if you give it time. But you might find a really cute one at first that you could get. And if it gets too big, bring it back to the store for someone with a bigger tank to appreciate. Coulter says, were you a Chippendale? No, I was not. I am always so far behind in the conversation with you guys. I feel bad. Dustin says, Mark was a stripper? Yes, I was. For a long time. But not the kind you're thinking of. You guys have dirty, dirty minds. And I did have people tell me, I always wondered how you could afford that tank. We know you're a stripper. We just didn't realize you made that kind of money. It was a great joke. It's true. I mean, like I said, it's just not the kind you're thinking of. And so when I used to be on a website called Reef Central, it would say Milev, and it would say the day I joined. And underneath it said occupation, it said professional stripper. And people really believed it, which was fine because it was true, but it wasn't Chippendale stripping. And so occasionally I would put a link to my previous business. And I would, back then, you could, I mean, you still can, but people don't do it. Back then, you could, keyword, or you could put a link to a word in your post. And so I would say, if you want to see samples of my work, and I would make the word samples clickable, and it would take them to my official website. And when they saw it, they're like, oh, you got me. Because see, what I used to do is I used to strip and wax floors for a living. And I would go in at nights, weekends, and holidays. I was stripping when everyone else was at home asleep. And I would strip the wax off the floors, get them pristine and brand new again, and put down new coats of wax, put all the furniture back in place. I did this residential and commercial. Did it for a very long time. I'm very good at it. And it was the ongoing joke. Also, there's another kind of stripper you may not be familiar with, and it has to do with printing. And there are printer strippers out there that I don't even know what they do. But I know it's involving printing, newspapers or postcards or something, and or maybe it's layouts, for what's going to be printed. It's something along those lines, or maybe it's something to do with the negatives. But anyway, mine was floor polishing, with a buffer, and I was really good. I had a saying. Actually, a guy was selling me magnets way back then, And he called me up, and he sounded like a radio DJ. And he says, Mark Levinson, we want to sell you these magnets, and you're going to buy them by the end of this phone call. And I was like, all right, why am I going to buy them? And he says, because we make the best, and every single customer you have is going to get one, and when they need somebody, they're going to see the magnet on their file cabinet or on their refrigerator. And I was like, all right, how much are these darn things? He goes, hang on. I think you need a catchphrase. Do you have a catchphrase? I'm like, no. And so he goes, how about this? We don't cut corners, we clean them. And I was like, okay, I'll buy your magnets. And so that was my catchphrase for a long time. And I had clients that were shocked that I could clean floors that well. They were like, they'd say, you actually did it. Like I had one client says, we need you to clean around every one of these legs of these racks. And I said, okay, no problem. And I would go in there with a razor blade on a stick, and I'd work my way around it so that it was pristine, and then put a fresh coat of wax, and it looked like a brand new floor. And they're like, you actually did it. And I was like, well, you hired me to do that. Like, yeah, but I didn't think you'd do it. And that's why I had so much business, because I was really good at what I did. So I finally just got sick of it. I was just tired of doing it. I did it for so long. I was like, okay, no more. I'm going to start making money doing something else. And I went from that. I stopped in 2009. I went to only working with Me Loves Reef, which is the perfect time to put this on the screen. Please buy things from melovesreef.com, because it helps pay the bills and keeps me fat and sassy. But I do appreciate the orders coming in. I have been catching up. I'm doing really good. I'm down to like 3 people that are old customers, and I've been knocking out things as quickly as I can. And every single day I'm making more momentum. And I know some of you have been reaching out for new orders, but I'm really trying to take care of the ones that are pending rather than taking on new ones. And so if you've been reaching out and you felt it's unsuccessful, or I'm not replying, I didn't have the time yet. I'm trying. There's only one of me, and there's a lot of you guys, and I will do the best I can. So feel free to send it to me again. I mean, today I got an email from my father saying, this is the 3rd time I've sent you this email, and I replied to him today. So it's not even you guys, it's everyone. Even my own father has to write me 3 times to get a reply. I apologize. There's just, like I said, last night I was so wiped out, I passed out early and slept the entire night, which is not normal for me. So if you buy things from my shop, I do appreciate it, because it helps pay the bills, like I said. It helps feed Spock. Some of the money from the account is going to go to this vet on Monday. And, that's just cost of doing business. But Me Loves Reef is my only source of income. And so when you guys do buy things, it only helps the company grow larger. So thank you for that. I'm going to leave that on the screen for a little bit longer. Okay, so Anthony says, my hippo tang has shown signs of ick for about a month. It's eating great and behaving normally, and no other fish has shown any signs. Could I be misdiagnosing? No, you could actually have a fish that has ick, and the other fish don't, because their immune system is strong enough to resist it. There is a good chance that if everything goes to crap someday, like there's a big long power outage, you have a kalkwasser overdose, you have a alkalinity overdose, your top off adds way too much fresh water, and it causes chaos. All those healthy fish suddenly become infected as well, because you got the one swimming around. Just because, and if you were to say, well, what if I remove the hippo and treat just it? That means my tank doesn't have ick everywhere else. No, your tank probably does have it. And there's a pretty solid chance that at some point you're going to see ick again. But if everything's healthy and acting normal, unless you're willing to go to the trouble of removing every fish from your tank now and putting them in a hospital tank for 6 to 8 weeks, to treat them for ick, to get rid of it, I would pretty much leave it be. And the reason I say that is because back when I had the 280-gallon reef, I had a powder blue tang that was gorgeous, beautiful, bright blue skin. I mean, it was like the color of this Me Loves Reef thing I got over my shoulder here. And so healthy looking. And every once in a while, it would just like burst out in ick, like it was pissed off for a day. It would just be covered in ick. And then, a day or 2 later, not a speck of ick on her. And I was like, how are you staying alive? And how is this not getting everywhere in my tank? And I mean, that fish is considered an ick magnet. Hippo tangs, they get ick as well. But the point is, I had a system filled with fish, including Spock and Crown Royal, the purple tang, and that powder blue tang, and those other fish never got it. And like I said, it showed up, it'd be there for a day or 2, and then it'd be gone for weeks, and then poof, it came out again. and it would be gone for weeks, and it just did this. And I had that powder blue for 5 years in my tank. So I told you guys in a previous live stream, I had a terrible accident where I turned off the pumps in my tank and was supposed to feed the tank and forgot, and left the tank with 0 power overnight and killed half my fish. And I lost that powder blue tang as well as the copper band in that disaster, which was completely my fault. And I never replaced the powder blue with another one because they get ick so easily. I didn't want to see that again. Plus, I don't like replacing a fish when one dies with another one. There's a guilt thing going on there. And so I'd rather just try something different rather than replace. Because, I don't know, it just feels weird. So I try not to do that. Emmanuel says, why does the industry never mention boron, potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus levels linked to cyanobacteria? I found out there's a link to these elements with cyano. What's your take on that? Well, I think you're thinking about it more than I am. We do know that, okay, here's the bottom line, because I've done research on cyanobacteria. Not what you're talking about specifically, but cyanobacteria exists in freshwater, brackish water, and salt water. It's found deep in the earth. There was some huge article came out a couple years ago, or maybe a year ago, and it was one of those stories where they dug down super deep into the earth, and they found a whole layer of cyanobacteria. And they're like, how is this possible? And it's this big mystery. Cyanobacteria is completely normal. It's not evil. It's not bad. We just don't like it when it turns red or green or blue and it covers our sand bed or our corals or the rockwork. But when it's invisible, we don't care that it exists and it's in our tank. So what happens is when the conditions get perfect in your tank for it to bloom, which means turn red or green or blue, or even like a dark bloody red or dark brown almost on the top of the sand, that blanket you can just scrape off like a sheet, that's when we hate it. But when we don't see it, we don't care at all that it exists. So what happens is some people will see cyano appear in their tank seasonally, like once a year or twice a year it appears, and they either wait for it to go away on its own, which can take forever, or they treat the tank to solve it within a matter of days, which is what I recommend, and then they don't see it again for a year or so. And that's the end of it. There's no big story. There's no big secret thing going on. But what are the perfect conditions that makes a cyanobacteria bloom? I don't know the science behind that one. I don't know the what the boron level has to be to suddenly make cyano appear and be visible. But I do know that when it happens, it's treatable. It can be resolved. And a week later, you can look at your tank and be happy again. So I do recommend that people just treat the tank with ChemiClean or Red Cyano RX. And then do the big water change, and then deal with the whole thing I was talking about the collection cup on the protein skimmer for a few hours. And then that's it. Your tank's nice and clean and pretty again. But the industry is talking more about those elements you've mentioned just as elements that our tanks need, especially through ICP testing. We're hearing more about it. Potassium has been a big topic all the way back to the Choral Zeovit days, where those people were doing this crazy science experiment, which kind of reminds me of the moonshiner dosing method from Andre Mueller down out of Houston. And he's got all these little bottles, and you have to put in 3 drops of this and 1 drop of that and 2 drops of this and 4 drops of this. And on this day, you got to do that and stand on one leg. And you get these beautiful corals, and it's fantastic. So back then, potassium was their big secret ingredient. And back then, we didn't have good test kits for potassium. And now test kits have gotten a little bit better. And again, ICP can tell you what your potassium level is through their super machines. So you can learn more about what your tank is lacking to know what you need to dose. But the relation of those elements to cyanobacteria, I don't know more about it. Mike, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. And you keep calling me that. I don't know if I'm supposed to be complimented or offended, but that's okay. And I do like $2 bills. How did you know? That's great. Well, I'm up to $6, guys. I haven't even taken off my shirt yet. Trevor says, what would you say is a good level of phosphate to aim for? Mine's around 0.2. Hope the back is okay. 0.2 is a little high. Ideally, we don't want 0. where a lot of people for the longest time have always shot for 0.03. But even if it's 0.1, that's okay. But 0.2 is getting there. 0.5 is worse. 0.75 is bad. 1.0 is really bad. 3.0, somebody needs to beat you with a wet noodle. So we don't want super high numbers. And my tank tends to range from 0.1 to 0.75 from week to week. It just depends. And I've noticed that it's been staying up quite a bit lately. I'm not really sure why. And I've been using phosphate RX a little bit more frequently than I have in the past. I used to use it like every 10 weeks. I feel like I'm using it now about every 4 weeks maybe. But the thing is, the higher the phosphate, the more likely you get nuisance algae in the tank. And whenever people have an algae problem, the first thing I say is use phosphate RX to knock the phosphate down. And they said, well, my phosphate test kit says I'm 0.03 or I'm 0. And I'm like, but your tank is full of algae, so clearly there's phosphate in the tank. So reach in your tank, rip out a bunch of algae, 20 minutes later do a water test, and I guarantee you your test kit will not say 0.03 or 0. It's going to be a higher number because in the process of ripping it out, it's mashing and tearing and releasing some of that phosphate right back into the water, and now you can test for it. So, I mean, you don't have to. I mean, the fact is, you know there's phosphate in the water. If you were to use phosphate RX or any other lanthanum-based product and you put it in the tank, if the tank starts turning cloudy, there's phosphate. So if your test kit says there's none, but the water's turning cloudy, it actually is in there, and you just got a false reading. So we want to keep the phosphate level low to keep the algae down and under control. Dustin says, have you tried the ReefBot yet? Do you have any opinions about it? I have not tried it myself. I've seen more and more people are getting it. I'm a little bit jealous. I'm thinking about getting one. I might at some point in the near future. And then I would have it do my phosphate tests and my nitrate tests because the Trident's doing the other stuff. And I don't know what else. Potassium, maybe? Odile says, what's your call on Miracle Mud? I don't see any reason to use it. Skyman says, I want to thank you for suggesting shower pan liner at the bottom of the stand. It has saved me a few times. It allowed me to catch a small leak and a few spills before they damaged the floor. That's awesome. I'm really happy about that. This one here, this sump behind me, has a shower pan liner under there I made back in 2010, or no, 2011. And it's the same one. And when we took out the old sump and I wiped it all down, it was in perfect condition. I mean, I had put like a sheet of that pink foam that I always put under every sump. And I guess some water had got in there at some point, you know, because that happens. And it had kind of peeled off some of the pink stuff and it stuck to the shower pan liner. And I just kept using a sponge and scrubbing away until it was completely gone. And when I got that thing looking 99% new again, I put in the new sump and the new top-off container and hooked up the new plumbing. And I love it, you know, and it was very durable. I bought it by the yard at Home Depot, and then I cut it to fit the shape I needed. And I bought this special glue that the can was, you know, about this big around with a, you know, the little the little brush that comes out. And it was, I think the glue was blue colored or something like that. And I folded the plastic to create corners for the 4 corners, and I glued it. And it only took like a few daubs for each corner. So I had this huge can that I didn't need anymore. I probably spent like $8 or $16 on this glue, and I used like a speck of it, and then that was it. It was kind of like, man, why'd I have to buy so much? But that was the only choice. And it worked out great. So I do recommend it. It's awesome. Keep in mind, if you use a shower pan liner under your tank, you know, to keep your floors dry and your, you know, catch those spills, if you're running external pumps that are not designed to be submerged, like the Vectra can be external, but it's designed to be internal. The Abyss can be run external or internal, but the Sequence Dart is external only. If your shower pan liner fills up with water and the external pump, like the Sequence pump, is submerged, it'll short out. It'll trip the breaker, it'll destroy the pump, you gotta buy a new pump. So you wanna keep in mind, how tall should you make the shower pan liner tray without destroying your external pump if you have one? Or do you have to raise the pump up like an inch higher so that way, even if the thing fills with water, it's not enough to get into the electric housing, you know, the electrical part of the housing of the external pump, and avoid tripping a breaker and destroying the pump. You know, if the foot gets wet, it doesn't matter. But if the innards get wet, it's a disaster. Crisis Film says, I'm not allowed to take our copies of Choral magazine home here at the LFS where I work at. Well, what if you bought them? Could you take them home then? Because now they belong to you. Actually, the easiest thing is just have a subscription and get them delivered to your mailbox. Odile says, I can't find that plant. I can't grow the chaetomorpha. You may be able to find different macroalgae from a website called live-algae.com or live plants, live-plants.com. They're out of Florida and they have like every kind of plant under the sun. And if you're, I don't know, I feel like you're international though, but if you're in the US, you can order from them. Lunatic Rider says, I've got a question. I bought a new acrylic tank and the overflow is leaking. I've had to scrape everything off. What else can I use to seal it up? So the overflow box inside the acrylic tank, they were glued together in the first place, correct? You're going to want to remove the whatever's there, you know, chip away at it. And you can put some weld-on number 16, but I would recommend when you get the tube, you know, it's going to have kind of a large orifice on the end. I go to a place like Michael's or Hobby Lobby and I get these tips that will fit the glue. I take the glue with me to Hobby Lobby and I find their extension tips and I try different ones to find what will fit the tube, and then when it does, I'll buy the pack, which is like 5 tips for 99 cents. And you can just trim it to have a very small orifice so you can really control the bead of glue. You don't want to use a lot of glue when it comes to weld-on because it'll crater the acrylic. So it's not like using caulk. It has to go on very fine. You want the area to be very clean first. You can use you can swipe the area clean with some denatured alcohol. And when I say swipe, I mean one wipe. You're not scrubbing away. You'll actually craze the acrylic. You're just doing one swipe. Now it's clean. And you can put your super fine bead of weld-on 16 where you are trying to reinforce, and then let it cure for 24 hours, and then you can do a water test. If you're doing multiple seams, like a seam here and a seam here and a seam here and a seam here, you're going to keep turning the project to make sure the glue stays. You're going to glue horizontally. So you run your bead horizontally where the glue is sitting, wait 10, 20 minutes. Now you can turn the tank and you can do the next horizontal seam. You don't want to glue downhill because it'll just run downhill and you have a big puddle at the bottom that starts cratering, which is the one thing you want to avoid. And you don't want to use very much. Whenever you put weld-on 16 on your acrylic, it will shrink by 1/3. So and it's not going to be pretty. So you don't want to use a lot because the more you use, the uglier it gets. But you just want to use enough to do the job. And hopefully that will help you out. King Neptune says, do you think it's better to do multiple smaller water changes or a few larger changes to bring nitrates down? The big water changes are going to make all the difference. I've told people this for years. If you do a 50% water change on your tank, you will cut the nitrates in half. And if you do multiple 50% water changes in a single week, you could bring them down really fast. So let's say your tank is 80 and you change 50% of the water and you put in new salt water, you will have nitrates of 40. And then 2 days later, you do it again, and now they're 20. And 2 days later, you do it again, and now they're 10. So, I'm sorry, 20 and then 10. So 80, 40, 20, 10. So 4 water changes, you could be in a much better place. And the nice thing is the number, once it's come down, should stay down there unless you have something in the tank that's automatically raising it up, such as a wet-dry sump with bioballs. Those things keep adding nitrate to the water constantly. That's why we don't use bioballs in our sumps. Lefty says, can you feed macroalgae to your fish? I don't do that. I know some people do. I guess my concern is, as you probably know, some fish, when they eat, let's just call them, let's just say they're eating the plants. They don't fully digest it and they poop some out. And my fear is that some of what they poop out will take hold in the rockwork and suddenly you have macroalgae growing in your display. So my choice is to actually feed the foods I want the fish to eat and use the macroalgae just for nutrient control and don't risk getting any of it into my system. That way you don't have to worry about having to constantly pick it out by hand because it's growing out of control in your display through your corals. Nick says, I've had that issue with, oh, okay, see, I was answering something earlier. I've had that issue with my dose during automatic water changes, something clogged in the line. And sometimes the automatic water change is using something like the dose. If the line loses its seal and it's sucking in air, it's, one side or the other is not moving water, it can throw things off. So it's really important to make sure all your gear is working. So Water Test Saturday is a great time to double check your other gear, make sure all your dosing pumps are working and are dosing the right amount. Do a test push on whatever device, however you do it, with your phone or manually with a button on the dose, and make sure that liquid is coming out of each tube. You might have to roll each tube between your fingertip to kind of break off the crusties, so that way liquid can come out, because maybe it's sealed itself shut and nothing comes out. And if you don't check that every week, you could end up having a big water quality shift, and you're trying to do catch up, trying to solve it, and you're like, what happened? And it's like, oh, the tube was clogged. Something so minor. So you definitely want to check and make sure everything's working properly and dosing the way it's supposed to be, and that all your solutions are not running dry. You want to make sure they're filled up. And Lunatic Rider, I saw you talking to someone else about this, so I'm just going to tell you no silicone in an acrylic tank. All we're doing is using Weldon to glue acrylic to acrylic. If this was an acrylic box going into a glass tank, yes, you could do silicone, you'd have to. Manny says, when are you going to start selling Prodibio? I got to get that on the website. I apologize, guys. And I only got a little bit, like enough to take some pictures to put on the site. I didn't get like a decent inventory, so I need to make sure I have enough in stock so when I put it up, it's not like sold out in the first order. That would be really dumb. So yeah, give me a little more time on that. Kevin says, when using a doser for alkaline, is it best to spread the dose out as long as possible? For example, dosing 30 milliliters a day, so do 3 milliliters 10 times a day for a total of 30. I'm using the GHL doser, so it's flexible. I don't think you need to break it up quite that slowly. I would dose the alkalinity in the beginning part of the day. I like to dose it early in the morning, like 6 a.m. And so start at 6, maybe again at 8, and then again at 10. So like 3 doses. So you could be 10, 10, and 10. And that way, the pH that your tank was at gets a little buffer to raise it up before your lights ever come on. And because during the late night hours, your pH goes to its lowest point. So when you get your GHL doser, adding some alkalinity, it's raising the pH up a little bit. If it's a big dip, you could actually dose all 30 to really bring it up. But you'll watch your graphs if you have any kind of way to track graphs, and you might see that it really shoots up high. So that might be a kind of a weird approach. So I would recommend that you dose a few times rather than a bajillion, and make sure that wherever the liquid is trickling in, like into the display or into the sump area somewhere, that there's a small power head directly under it that is breaking it up and mixing it as soon as it hits the water. The people that dose into some area of their sump, I'll oftentimes see like shale on the walls or turns white or there's a flaky stuff. It's because it just congealed and never made it into the tank. And they have to dose more and more and more. They don't know why. It's because it's not mixing into the tank. It's kind of just like falling to the bottom and turning solid and doing nothing for the tank. So I like to have a little tiny pump that uses probably like 3 watts of power, and you plug it in, you leave it running 24 hours a day, and it's just sitting at the bottom of the sump and it's shooting straight up, and where the surface of the water is, you might see like a little mound of water, and that's where you want to drip in your dose. So as soon as it hits the water, it mixes up and travels on, and you'll end up using less product for what you need because it's mixing properly. If you're dosing into the tank, you want to dose in an area of high flow that's really where the surface of the water is really agitated. That's the best place to dose anyway, if you're not using a sump. We need to end this. We're at 2 hours and 13 minutes. I wanted to stop at 2. Crisis Films, thank you for saying you're using the Reef Trace app. You're my new best friend for today. Yeah, I really do appreciate that. Yeah, it's a great app, and I use it frequently. Let's Campaholic, thank you for sticking through this channel, watching so many of the videos. You've been watching for a long time. Tam Hodge says, are you the two-part solution for fish quarantine you had in a previous video, are you still selling it? I can't seem to find it on your site. It's in the dry goods area, even though it's a liquid. It's called Safety Stop. You can just type in Safety Stop Milo's Reef into Google. It'll take you right to it. And I mail it, so it's cheaper than what my website will charge. A lot of the things that you guys are buying are little tiny things. They go in a very small box or a padded envelope. And so when my website charges, you know, a lot for FedEx, I usually, well, I give out refunds every single day. I ship it to the post office instead because it's cheaper. It's first class or priority mail. And then I will, like I had one person, he ordered a box of, he ordered the F Aptasia. And the website charged him like $19 to ship. And I was able to ship it for $6 with the post office. And so I gave him $13 back. And I'm happy to do that. I'm not trying to rip you guys off. So if you are not familiar with my website or you don't like what the website's charging and shipping, if it's little tiny things like Live Rock Enhance, the VCA vacuum nozzle for cleaning your sump, Safety Stop, Benareef, Prodibio, you know, these little things that are lightweight, I can ship those for less money and give you the difference back so you have more money for something else in the future. I don't hold on to your money or say you have a $13 credit with me now. I just give you your money back via PayPal. And they're $5 each, and you can buy as many as you want. RC Jedi says, nice profile pic. Is your 60-gallon cube custom or off the shelf? I would say it's off the shelf because all it was a glass box with 3 sides that are Starfire and a bottom. There was no overflow box, it wasn't drilled. It was just something that I think somebody would have used for a planted tank or something. I ended up making my own overflow box for it and drilling holes through the bottom myself, and it's been running now like this for over 6 years. Parky48 says, I may have white spot in my tank, so you're talking about ick, but I have no coral. What would be the best way for treating the tank? Well, I mean, you know, I would tell you not to treat in the tank, but there are some people that have been lowering the salinity of the entire display tank because it's just fish and rocks, and they lower it down to 1.009 and keep it that way for 21 days or longer, and then eventually they bring it up very gradually over a 2-week period to get it back up to the proper salinity. That is something you possibly could do, but all the bacteria that was beneficial on the rock and in the sand, I have a feeling won't survive the low salinity. I think it's too low. So that's why so often what we do instead is we recommend that the fish be removed and put in a separate system. So we want to put the fish in a quarantine tank. We want to deal with the white spot there. We want to leave the display tank alone for weeks without fish so that any ick that's still present will go away. M. Chris says, what are your thoughts on the Bubble King minis? Specifically looking at the 169 with the DC pump. Actually, I need to look that up. I don't know the answer to that. Bubble King has a really good following. They seem to be really solidly built. I know a few people that had them and love theirs. You know, I know a guy had a ginormous one, and I think he got a really good deal on it. I don't think he bought it full price. You know, he probably knew somebody, or somebody sold it used. But it was a beast. It was hard to clean. It was so big and heavy. But I'd have to look that one up to see more about it to give you an answer, because I don't know. Trent says, I have a set of zoas that look like they're pooping, but I never can tell if it's actually exposing zooxanthellae or if it's a, you know, something else. It probably is expelling zooxanthellae. That's not unheard of. It happens from time to time. It's not all the time. The coral in question might even look a little bit pale afterwards. Sometimes they expel the excess. They have just too much in them, and they don't need it all. So they're just letting go of some just so they can feel better, if that makes any kind of sense. You know, they only need a certain amount. And so if you see some come out, don't worry. If you keep seeing it happen over and over and over, that might be another thing. But I don't think you need to dip it or do anything. I would just leave it alone and keep an eye on it. You could take a turkey baster to it and kind of blow gently toward the coral to kind of puff away anything so they stay clean and healthy. And I would just keep an eye on it, but I wouldn't pull it out and dip it just because you saw that. Duria says, what do you think about using peroxide to clean old used live rock? Everything in that sentence was like, I'm trying to say it the way I'm thinking it. You could. Some people use bleach. Some people use peroxide. I prefer not to. Actually, I've never done any of those things. When it comes to live rock, I like it because it's alive. And I want the sponges, I want the bugs, I want the bacteria. I don't want to kill any of it. I like it all, I fear none of it. And if I get the occasional pest, I just fight the pest. But I don't want to affect my live rock. So I choose not to do that personally. And now that there's a product out there called Live Rock Enhance, you could definitely clean your used old reef rock in a barrel of salt water. You put in a big old pump, like a mag pump in there for some good circulation. Nice clean salt water. Put in the Live Rock Enhance. It's 1 scoop per 25 gallons. So if you have a trash can, you're putting in 1 scoop. And you could do that every couple of days for 4 weeks. And if you want, once a week, you could drain that water out. You could even make a second barrel of salt water, and the first barrel, take the rock, and as you're lifting it out, shake it off in that water, and then move it to the clean barrel. Then move the pump over, and if you have a heater, because it's winter, put the heater in there as well. And then add the Live Rock Enhance in there, and basically you're switching between barrels once a week. And as you get rid of the old water, you're getting rid of the old phosphates and all the crud that came off. You're gonna see a lot of crap in the bottom of the barrel that the rocks were shedding, but the live rock will still be intact. You won't lose the life. Now, if this is dry rock that never has, that's been sitting on someone's back porch or in their basement, their garage, it's not as living as I'd like, but it's not dead. The core of it's still alive. And a lot of times people will take live rock that sat in the garage, and then they think, well, it's just dry, but I'll just put that in my tank. And then some weird stuff happens because everything inside the core that was still moist, the water trapped within the core of the rock, kind of releases the uglies into your tank and causes some chaos. So again, if it's used rock, get into a barrel of salt water, have it in that salt water for 4 to 8 weeks, use the Live Rock Enhance, get it nice and clean, and it'll actually seed it with fresh bacteria too, because the Live Rock Enhance is an actual type of bacteria. It's a bacteria that eats decay and waste. And then you can put that in your tank and you'll have live rock. So that'd be my recommendation. Crazy Lynn says, what is the name of the food you feed your fishies that you call Fruity Pebbles? It's this one here, marine chips from Instant Ocean, but it's really hard to come by. And they've told me that they're not making it anymore. But they have, the weird thing is, they had like these jars they were giving away at one of the Macnas, and he says, it's the exact same thing. And I said, no, it's not. And I knew it wasn't, and it isn't. But he was swearing by it. I said, look, I'm going to start a campaign, and we're going to make you guys make this again, because this stuff's amazing. And so I only have my little stash, and then it's gone. But at that point, I'll probably have to switch to, like I said, to PE mysis pellets or something. But I really do like that one, and I've been using it for a long time. I feel like, well, I mean, I don't know why they changed or why they chose not to sell it anymore, because they were giving it away forever at every show. So they obviously wanted people to try it, and then we like it, and then they stop selling it? That makes no sense. John's Reef says, what is the scar on your neck? I've always wanted to know. In 2015, so 5 years ago, I had surgery on my neck right here, and they installed a new disc to replace a bad one. So I have a bionic disc in my neck. And last December, I was hoping to have 2 more installed above it for 2 more bad discs, but my insurance company refused to pre-approve it, so my surgery has been put off indefinitely until I don't know, get a different insurance company, fight with a lawyer. I don't know what to do, but I got to do something. But for now, I just felt like I was too far behind on orders to deal with that mess as well. So I've been focusing on the business and my customers, trying to take care of their needs rather than trying to, get all involved in the medical crap. So I've been kind of holding off. But anyway, eventually that scar is supposed to blend in, but it still hasn't. It's still there. It's kind of ugly. It all comes down to lighting. I mean, it looks fine. It's just kind of there. Tweedo says, how can I get rid of vermitid snails? Hermit crabs, breaking off tubes, and super glue gel. Also, if you have dental tools where you snap off the tube, you can then put the tool into the hole and kind of grind and grate away and maybe even break off more of the body inside the rock. But closing the hole with a little bit of glue is a great way to do it, because then if the worm was inside, it's cocooned in there and it's just going to die in there. Jamie says, I have 3 acans all in the sand right next to each other. 2 are doing really well, but my rainbow acan is closed up and the areas between the polyps has become skeletal. Any tips? Well, they're all near each other and 2 are doing well, so maybe the third one is being picked on by something. Sometimes what we need to do is sit across the room from the tank, especially at night when the lights are off in the room so you're invisible. And just kind of watch and see what your fish are doing, see what your shrimp are doing, see what your hermit crabs are doing. Could just be an off week. It could be that that coral does need to be dipped because there's some kind of pest on it. I have a little acan garden over here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 types right here. And sometimes a few of them are closed up and it doesn't look so great. And I can kind of see some skeleton, or I'm like, is there a polyp missing? And I start blaming the copper band instantly. But then other times everything's fluffed up and happy. So it could just be something is slightly off in your tank right now, or something is pestering it. But yeah, I would do that. I would look at the tank from a distance and see if anything's happening. You know, just watch the tank for 5 or 10 minutes, that area, and see if you see like a fish going around and kind of like nip and then swim away and then come back and nip and nip and then swim away. That could be happening. Or it could be that that coral, like I said, needs to be dipped. And if you use Revive, that's one of the coral dips I like. I sell it. It's very gentle on LPS corals, and you can use that and dip it in the appropriate amount for 15 minutes, and then take a turkey baster and blow it off from every angle, and then put it back in your tank, and maybe it'll perk right up and be happy again like the other ones. Oh, that sounds so easy. Marcus says he has a rock flower anemone tank with just lights, heater, and a power head. See, doesn't that sound simple? I need a simple tank. I love that. Oh, that's a good one. Red one, I say red, I don't know. RD1 says, how many gallons is considered a nano tank? I think 29 and below. And then the really small tanks, that's like 1 to 3 gallons, would be a pico tank. There may be a rule of thumb. I haven't heard anyone specifically say these numbers apply, because people will joke and say, well, your 400 gallon is a nano compared to the ocean, which it totally is. BBB VVHK, can I buy a vowel? Says, can you please talk about water bucks? What do you want to know? I really don't have any opinion other than they're pretty. Macy's Daddy says, do you have any new acrylic items you're thinking about making? I have a project that is coming up here in the next couple of days that is going to be a holder for the Trident to hang it up on the inside the cabinet for a customer. He ordered it about a month ago, maybe longer. And so I'll be making the first one, and we'll see how that goes. That is a new thing. Right now I'm just trying to take care of the old things. But that will be new to me, you know, because it'll be a new shape I have to kind of come up with and design on my computer. Let's see. John says, would it be possible to keep 2 skunk clownfish in a 30-gallon tank? Other livestock would be small gobies, mixed reef, but lightly stocked fish-wise. Actually, I would like to see you put in more than 2 because they're harem fish. So I would suggest you get like 5 or 7 of them. I know it's a 30-gallon, but they're clowns and they don't get ginormous. I have 11 in my tank, and actually last night I was sitting here watching TV and I looked over and all of them were right here in the front corner of the tank. And I was able to count, and there was still 11, which is great because I put them in 4 years ago, almost to the day. I mean, it's like March 5th is going to be 4 years. And to be able to see that all 11 are still in the tank all this time later is great. You know, it's nice to see that consistency. So at the very least, I'd put in 3. You know, if you really want to keep it the load light. But, you know, just 2 seems like not enough because they do like to be in harems. Bjorn says, what's your take on nitrate levels of 20 to 25? My tank's running at 25 currently and the corals could not look better. I've chased numbers but stopped for now. That's exactly what I was about to say. Just if everything's looking good, just be happy and don't worry about it. We sit there and we think about these numbers and we try to achieve them, and while we're trying to hit this magical number, we start killing our livestock. That's why a lot of times the advice I give on this channel, I tell people, well, how is your tank looking? And if everything's good, do you really need to make any kind of change? Just because I talked about it doesn't mean you need to do it. Or your tank is in such distress you need a solution, then hopefully what I'm recommending will help. But my own tank right now has been around 35 for the last few months. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about 25. Scott Morrison says, could you make me an acrylic ATO container for my nano tank and ship it to Scotland? I probably could. We need to know the dimensions and I need to get you a quote on what shipping might be. It might be a lot. So I'll have to double check. Brian Bench says, if you have a chance to talk about the ReefTrace app and what the benefit is and how it works. Well, ReefTrace is a cloud-based app. You buy it once. There's no monthly fee. It has a bunch of different sections built in. I'll pull it up on the screen for you guys really quick. So this is the ReefTrace app. And so here are my latest parameters up to last week. I haven't done my water test yet today. And over here, you've got your statistics, you've got water parameters. The parameters are, the ones with the hearts are the ones I always measure every single week. Let me turn this off so you can see the full screen. And there are more in here that I just don't have on my list. See, all these are also included, and you can track every single one of these. The next section that I like is notes, because this is where you're able to keep track of when you've added something new or made a change. And you've got all these choices at the top to assign them to different categories for looking at. Over here, you've got the ability to log something quickly, and I can log all my parameters with one tap of the finger. There's also the parameter guide. So this is natural seawater. These are the parameters that I recommend. And then these are the average parameters from all the users of ReefTrace. Why are all these people chatting me right now? Stop it. But one of my favorite parts of this app is the LFS locator. So what it does is it looks in the area for any fish stores that are near your area, and you can actually take the target and you can move it to find if there are any other stores. And you can see there's a lot of fish stores in the Fort Worth and Dallas area. So I really like using that when I'm traveling to see where there's a store so I can go check them out when I'm out and about. And it's always looking within a 45-mile radius. Other than that, the note-taking is huge. It's just great for keeping track of everything. The tracking your parameters and knowing if they're high or low, it tells you as soon as you put the number in if it's high or low or normal. I like that. And the LFS locator is great. Also, Critter ID is built in. There's a marketplace that hasn't really been used a lot, but it allows some vendors to promote their sales through that tab inside of the app. The app can send you reminders. Like if you tell yourself, I want to change carbon once a month, you set a reminder in notes, and then when you pick up your phone, when it's time, you'll get a note that you'll say, ReefTrace, and then it'll say it's time to change the carbon, and you'll just get that, or it's time to dose Perdibio, or whatever it is that you've set up as a reminder. So I really enjoy the app for all those things, and we don't abuse it. We have the ability, the app developer that I'm partners with, to send out notifications to you. We could say every Saturday, time to test your water, but we don't abuse it. So you don't have to worry about being bothered with a lot of stuff. But it's a very useful app, and it's nice and solid, and it works for iOS and it works for Android. Aftershokz says, I want to manually top up the beneficial bacteria you can get from carbon dosing, like with no pox. What products can I use? I was told to use Sechem Prime. Prime is not a bacteria that I know of. I don't know what it is, but I don't think it's bacteria. Maybe I'm wrong. Or Dr. Tim's. Dr. Tim's, there's so many different bacteria available these days. You've got Perdibio is the one I use every 15 days. There is Microbacter 7. And now they've got the new Microbacter. So this is Microbacter 7 in large form. There is, I'm trying to think who else has bacteria on the market. I mean, there's, we were talking about Live Rock Enhance, that's a type of bacteria. So it really comes down to what kind you're trying to put in your tank, or what you're trying to diversify to what other, what strain do you have? Are you trying to add more, or are you trying to complement the one you have now so there's more of it? Microbacter 7 is pretty much the standard. We've been using that one for a very long time when you want to add more bacteria to your tank. I guess that's my answer. That's my final answer. Bradley says, I have blue tort that started encrusting and based out, but now it started turning white on the base and is slowly creeping up. Any idea what could be causing this? That's typically referred to as STN, which is slow tissue necrosis. It could be that the coral, I mean, because I can't see it, but it could be that it's a lack of light getting to the base, or it could just be the alkalinity of the tank is not stable enough to where this coral can stay healthy all the way down to the base. A lot of times shading will cause the whiteness to happen at the bottom. That's completely normal with all corals. As they get shaded, the part underneath starts to weaken, and then finally it just dies for whatever reason. And so that could be happening. But if it keeps spreading and spreading, it could actually be STN, which is, I'm sorry, it could be RTN, which is rapid tissue necrosis. So it starts off as STN, which is slow, and then it picks up momentum. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're like, well, 25% of it turned white, but 75% is still there. And then the next day it's like gone. There's like one polyp of life left. That's RTN, which is rapid tissue necrosis. And the entire thing goes up in smoke. You just have to remove the skeleton, throw it out, start again. But I would say normally it's an alkalinity problem with STN. It's not an absolute rule, but that's the first thing I think of as alkalinity. It could be nutrients. It could be lack of light. But that's my first thought. And your parameters look right. Beatrice says, my Trident has been consistently wrong for calcium. This is my third unit and it's still wrong. 350 to 450 ppm swing between calibrations is ridiculous. If I taste the water, I get more accurate results. Wow, that's amazing. Why would you buy a Trident when you can use your tongue? To be honest, there are a few of us that use Tridents that only care about the one number, and that's alkalinity. And the other tests are just bonuses. I have noticed that my Trident has been accurate with alkalinity, like exactly right. Calcium has been very close. Lately, it's been super close. And magnesium did not match my old test kit, but it's matching my new test kit. So it seems like it's on track, but if you keep getting a new unit, it sounds like you're dealing with customer support. You know, they're trying to help you. I would try to find out what's happening. I mean, there's something unique to your situation because that's not a common problem where it changes constantly, this big swing you're talking about. Also, you know, there's other things to keep in mind. Are you two-part dosing? Is it mixing properly into the system, or are you using a calcium reactor? Is the tank being supplemented between water changes? You know, I mean, there's those things. Also, is the tubing kinked? Is there a problem with something on the tubing, on the innards, like there's air getting into the lines? I mean, there's a lot of little nuances that may need to be addressed, but I have a feeling they want to help you get this resolved. I can't imagine them sending you, 3 different units. And I mean, I understand your frustration. I get it. So if you can't get it to work, then I guess you're going to have to go back to the taste test method you seem to like so much. Jake, I think I talked about this about 24 minutes ago. Best way to get rid of green hair algae. All my parameters are untraceable with Salifert test kits, so I know it's not excessive amounts of nutrients that's causing it. What else is causing it? Too much light, too much phosphate, not enough cleanup crew. Those are the 3 things. So I would remove the, I would lessen the light. Like if you're running it 12 hours a day, change it to 9, change it to 8 hours a day, less light. Rip out all you can manually. Dose phosphate RX to kill off the phosphate in the water that is there, even though your Salifert test kit says it's not, it's there. And put in a big healthy cleanup crew. You need 1 critter per gallon. So you're gonna need a whole bunch of snails and a whole bunch of hermit crabs and put them on the areas covered in algae. You know, what's left of the algae you left behind. And if you see snails on the glass, put them back on the algae and keep them working, because brand new snails are starving. So are the hermit crabs. If you ever look at the fish store where they're selling them, it's a big empty tank with a bunch of gravel and not a thing to eat. So they've had nothing to eat on the way to the fish store. They get to the fish store, there's nothing to eat. You put them in your tank and boom, there's a smorgasbord of food to snack on, and you keep putting them where you need them to work. And that will get rid of your hair algae problem. And I have a video about this on my channel you could watch, but it pretty much is everything I just described. Jason says, are mini carpet anemones more sensitive to what? I don't know what the question is. I don't know what you're asking here. Got Jew. I see the profile pic. Do you have any experience with using Planaria Zero to get rid of hydras in a saltwater tank? Nope. I think you mean hydroids. Tried to scrum some off the rock and then just more pop up. Yeah, that's normal. Hydroids are bad in that you scrub and they just return. Some people will cover them with something like the two-part putty you mix up to hold corals in place. They'll put a blanket over the hydroids to like cap it, and then a few weeks later they peel it off and they're gone. That's one method. The cleanup crew could help. There is a nudibranch out there that eats them, but finding that one nudibranch is a miracle. Actually, I'd only seen one for the first time not too long ago, and I put that guy on my critter ID after getting permission from the person that filmed it. So neat to know there's such a thing out there because we didn't know there was such a nudibranch. But ripping it off is your main method. Scrubbing it off never works because scrubbing spreads. It's more like peel off. What is offending you is my method. Oh, thank you so much, Graham. Molybdenum. Perfect. See? If they would just put that on the bottle, that would be super helpful. I have to somehow remember that. As soon as I walk away from this live stream, I'll forget it again. Daniel says, I set up a new 125-gallon tank, cycling it with shrimp, but now I can't get the skimmer under control. It's good for a few hours, then it's crazy. I adjust, and then it's crazy. I'm using the Nile skimmer. Okay, so my thought process is, first of all, the tank's very new. You just finished a cycle. You don't really need to run the skimmer yet, but you are. I think maybe the water level in your sump is changing and it's not stable at the same height. If it is stable, then perhaps you don't have the skimmer adjusted at the right height for now. And you should find a spot that it just pick a spot. I really like the base of the collection cup. So let's pretend my mug is the collection cup. So here's the cup, there's a lid on top, and then you got the skimmer beneath it. I would have the bubbles bubbling right here at the bottom of the collection cup and just see how it goes. Also keep in mind, the weather outside affects your protein skimmer. And as a storm comes in and the temperatures change rapidly, and it's snowing and it's raining and then it's sunny and it's beautiful and then it's back to another storm, the barometric pressure is constantly changing and it makes your skimmer change accordingly. So if you are bubbling way up high in the cup, it's going to overflow as soon as there's a slight change in weather. Or if the water level in the sump rises a little higher and higher and higher, it'll push the bubbles up higher in the cup and then it's overflowing and it seems like your skimmer is misbehaving. Or there's a possibility that you have a bad pump in the skimmer and it's surging, which means that you need a new pump inside that new skimmer. Maybe you have a bad pump, but that would be the last thing I'd believe. If you could plug that pump into a kilowatt device, which is a $20 gizmo, you plug that thing into the wall, you plug the skimmer into that thing, the kilowatt, and then you hit the wattage button and you just watch the number. And the skimmer, let's say you've got the Nios 120 or something, you might be pulling 9 watts. So if it just stays at 9 watts all the time, the skimmer's not surging. If it says 3 watts, 14, 3 watts, 19, 4 watts, 13, okay, it could be surging and messing up. But my thought is you just don't have it bubbling at the right height. Find a spot where it seems to be the best for the most of the day. And if it goes up a little bit over and into the cup for a little while and then you feed the tank and it drops down quite a bit in the body, don't touch it again. Just leave it alone and see how it operates. I actually have a protein skimmer video on this channel where I just talked about skimmers for the entire, I guess it was an hour. And you should watch that one. That's a really good one to help you settle it in. I run 2 Nios skimmers and I don't have that problem whatsoever. Wow, I feel like the chats I'm finally getting to are like an hour ago of what I talked about. I'm much too far behind. Chosen Jacob says, do you have any experience of using ceramic rock? No, I've never used it. I've heard they can leach nasty stuff, vanadium, lithium. Just think it's better for the environment than live rock nowadays. I'm a huge fan of live rock, and I have no problem with live rock because live rock is actually man-made. They're not just taking rock out of the ocean. They are actually making the rock, and then they put it in the ocean for months, and they keep flipping it over, and then they harvest it from the ocean, and they blast it with a pressure washer, and then they ship it to the fish stores. So I actually love live rock. And if I can get some from Florida, or if I can get some from Fiji, I'm a happy camper. But I've never used a ceramic rock. I know some people have. it didn't seem to stick. You know, they used it for a while, and then the person abandoned it. They said that's enough. I don't know if it was an algae problem or, like you said, it was the stuff being leaching from of it, you know, out of it. But it just, I want something that looks natural, and very often the ceramic stuff was more like backgrounds, like it was meant to hide the overflow box, or as the background of the tank itself, and you held it on with silicone or great stuff, or you just leaned against the back, or you tied it onto zip ties to a piece of egg crate. You know, there's different methods, but I just didn't like it because it just looked so odd to me. It didn't look normal or natural. So. Gabriel says, water test, all days that end in Y. That's good. Martinez, we're back to your automated dosing of the foods. Yeah, I mean, try it out. Let me know how it goes. All right, my back is getting fed up. I can't go to the rest of these questions. I'm going to have to apologize that I can't keep answering everything. There's so many questions here, and we have been going for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and I need to stop because I'm just wiped out. So I apologize to all of you that asked me things. And let me just scroll through really fast. Oh my God, there's so many comments here. Oh, I can't ignore this. So Lamont, thank you very much for the super chat. Does a sponge run up the nitrate and phosphate in the sump? It's possible that it can. You can remove the sponge from your sump and you can rinse it out in some used salt water, like in a bucket of salt water, just really wring it out. You could possibly rinse it in new clean salt water and reinstall it, because it is going to build up with a lot of foul stuff. It's trapping everything, right? So I would pull that out periodically, maybe once a month, and see if you see better results. And then Keith, thank you very much for the super chat. That was very much appreciated. Thank you. I'm hitting up all these really quick because I don't want people to say, I sent you something you didn't even notice. Adam, thank you very much for this super chat as well. And there's another one here. Manny, thank you. And I'm glad you like the coaster. Yeah, I'm still putting a coaster in every single order. And some of you people are ordering several times from our website, and every time you order, you get a coaster. And I keep waiting for one day someone to say, look, I've got 6 coasters or something like that. I feel one day that's going to happen on Instagram or in Club Miller's Reef. I didn't put that on the screen today, so let me do that really quick. Club Miller's Reef was designed to help hobbyists on a daily basis. It is intentionally designed for all you YouTubers to come chat with us on a daily basis. It is a group that I own on Facebook, and we have several moderators. We want to keep it friendly. We want to keep it peaceful. We want to answer your questions. We don't want anyone to be ashamed or embarrassed to ask anything. We don't allow people to be put down or berated or attacked or trolled. We just clean house. And we are now over 6,500 people in the group. Some people come in that are not from YouTube. They're coming in just because they happen to see the group and said, hey, let me join. But others have been followers of my website for a long time, or they follow me on Instagram, or they're following me here on YouTube. And so I designed it for you guys so we could talk on a daily basis. And if you have a question you want to ask me in Club Miller's Reef, you can tag me. You can tag Mark Levinson, or you can tag Miller's Reef Inc. And either way, it'll give me a notification to where I can see your thread. And if for some reason you can't tag me, for some weird reason, usually a moderator will jump into the thread and tag me for you, but it's just at and then Mark Levinson or at Miller's Reef Inc. And then I can see it and I can answer you. But I'm really enjoying seeing your tanks and hearing your experiences, seeing your DIY things you've come up with. It's a lot of fun for me. And so please join the group. And if you're not a Facebooker and you refuse to come, I get it. That's fine. We're still here on YouTube. You still we may be talking over on Instagram. I mean, there's a lot of you guys out here. Jim L, yes, I would do that. Andrea, if you're still here, or Eric, if you're watching, let's add Jim to the I'm willing to pay for shipping of the magazine, and we'll do that. And is there any more super chats that got ignored? Okay, that's it. I got to the bottom of the list. I know I skipped a whole bunch of you. I'm sorry, we just ran out of time. Today is Water Test Saturday. Please test your water. I want you to grab all of your test kits. I want you to grab your automatic mixing thing if you have one. If you haven't, I keep seeing it for sale on Facebook. It keeps showing up my feed. But test your water. You want to measure alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate, salinity, temperature, pH, and you want to track it week after week after week. So that way, as things are shifting, you can make adjustments and corrections immediately. So that way your tank can continue to thrive and be healthy, and hopefully avoid the bad things that happen from a tank that's being neglected. Because the bottom line is, we talk about tanks, we talk about gear, we talk about parameters, but what it really is all about is the livestock. And these are living creatures that rely on us to keep them healthy and alive. And so when we fail them, they're the ones that suffer. You might complain, hey, I lost $80 on this frag or something, but that coral is no longer alive. So, I mean, there is some responsibility on our part. Husbandry is very important, and water testing is the core of proper tank husbandry. So by doing your due diligence, your fish and your corals are going to do really, really well. And when you ignore it and when you just let it go, they don't do well. And in the end, they might lose their lives because of it. So it's really important that we think about the animals and not just about, the fancy new pump or whatever that's on the market. Guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And there will be another live stream next Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Bye, guys.